wesn.
The Minister of Finance, the Honourable Colum Imbert, presented his budget just over 45 minutes ago. The numbers are in, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WESN's post-budget panel debate for fiscal year 2023-2024. I'm Keaton Shaw, and good evening. I'd first like to welcome the guests who are joining us for this part of the programme. Alongside me is political analyst Derek Ramsamouj. Good evening, Derek.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you this
I am
evening?
doing well. It's good to see you once more. And with us via the Zoom platform, we're joined by the opposition member of Parliament for Mayara. He's also the Shadow Minister of Trade and Industry. He is MP Rushton Parry. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good evening.
We're also joined by economist Dr. Gokul Boslan, Dr. Rebecca Gokul Boslan. Good evening, welcome to the program. And we are also joined by chartered accountant, that is Ryan Lalsing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good evening, everyone.
Just to do a quick recap of the numbers presented by the Minister not too long ago. Expected revenue for 2023-2024 is 54.012 billion, whilst expected expenditure is 59.209 billion, a deficit of $5.197 billion. The theme for the budget presented by the Minister is building capacity for diversity and growth in a world of challenges. I'll start with you, Dr. Boslan, Gokul Boslan, and thank you once more for joining us. The figures presented by the Minister of Finance, deficit, of course, he's placing his budget on an average oil price of US $85 per barrel and an average gas price of US $5 per MMBTU. The figures presented by the Minister of Finance, your initial analysis from all that was presented.
Sure. So my initial analysis is I'm a little concerned, to say the least. In doing a budget, it is important for you to understand what the parameters of that budget is, and determining in the first instance what is an appropriate price that conditions your revenue is where I would have started. As at the end of August 2023, expectations for the price of oil, WTI international, was set around $65 a barrel for 2024. So that immediately sends a red flag to me as to perhaps a gap in revenue that we would likely to see emerging around the mid-budget review. So I would start there in terms of really unpacking where we would see the economy going in the next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned your concerns. In that sense, where do you see the economy heading within the next year?
So just taking the pulse as to what is going on the ground, and all of us have generally our ears to the ground. My esteemed panelists would have been or would be engaging with the general public in various spaces. There is this expectation that maybe things are going to get tighter. Maybe we are going to see a worsening of some of those conditions that result in poorer standards of living that we would need to contend with.
Mm-hmm. I now go to Mr. Ryan Lalsing. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us this evening. From an accounting perspective, the concerns expressed by Dr. Gokul, your thoughts, are they around similar sentiments being expressed following the Minister's presentation?
Yes, well, good evening, Keaton and the panelists. I felt it was a fair budget. We've come to expect quite a lot of these things over the years, right? What I felt it lacked was a lot of specifics. So again, we were told what our current production of natural gas is, and it's expected to increase. We didn't hear of what is the intended increase or that target, as well as we're not hearing much about what our oil production figures are daily, and of course what the economist was just telling you about. We have a figure per barrel of oil we pegged our revenues against, but we don't have an expectation or announcement of what number of barrels or what number of cubic feet of gas will produce. So some specifics were lacking. It was nice to see the incentives for the farming and in agriculture. Again, specifics were lacking in terms of it is in keeping with the theme, which was the building of the capacity for diversification, because from what we are seeing funds being allocated to build that framework, to fix the roads, predial larceny programs and loans. This is just building the framework. We still have a lot to do where agriculture is concerned to generate that much needed forex. And I think the next step is processing facilities for food production, and some of those specifics were lacking.
Derek, expectation versus reality. We've heard the concerns expressed by economist Dr. Google Boston. We've heard from Ryan Lansing, and we will go to the opposition Member of Parliament in a moment. But before we do that, your initial thoughts on what was presented by the Minister earlier?
If we look at this present Minister and his presentations of the 7 previous budgets, you can see a similarity in pattern. You would expect to see, as he clearly identified, a bit more expenditure, but there's a deficiency in terms of revenue. Trying to keep it within the international acceptable levels when it comes to the debt ratio, when it comes to the gap to close. However, it's more of the same. I would tend to agree. It's at best a lack of detail, at worst much to do about nothing. Because if you look at last year's budget, and if we looked at some of the deliverables from last year's budget, he has failed to deliver for whatever the reasons, and it's now an extension of the same. For example, the whole notion of data, the data center, for example, the notion of the whole diversification of the budget, of the private sector. So it's a very well written from a technical perspective, because you have a lot of public bureaucrats that participate. But the question is that of deliverables. Which elements of his budget can he deliver in the next 12 months? And is he preparing for perhaps an election budget at the year 2024?
Well, MP Parry, welcome to the program. You're with us via Zoom, and we thank you very much. But all that has been stated. A budget does not necessarily present all the specific figures, but what it really does, it's a method of communication that really tries to inspire some level of confidence, some level of comfort, informing the nation of where we are at this point in time. Precisely based off of that, where we are at this point in time, and the planning that has been mentioned, or the plans that the Minister wishes or hopes to implement, do you see them being realistic?
Thank you for having me this evening. And I mean, after spending close to 4 hours in a very cold chamber of Parliament listening to the Minister of Finance, and there was nothing new. There was nothing inspirational. There was nothing that addresses some of the main concerns of the population. Now, I mean, 4 hours into the budget, then the Minister talks about crime. When I would have thought that crime being the pervasive issue in the country today, and because of the level of crime and criminal activity, it has this spin-off effect on the business community, the lack of investment, the lack of foreign direct investment. When you look at the announcements made by a lot of those foreign embassies and so on, it was more of the same. If you look at the 2021, 2022, 2023 budget statements, it's almost a ditto copy. And quite frankly, the minister talks about diversification in his 9th budget. It is too late. It is too late for him. That whole drive towards diversification ought to have been somewhere in the 3rd or the 4th budget going forward. When you look at all the agricultural incentives he spoke about, they are all repeated. It is the same things come over and over again. He spoke about $300 million additional funding to agriculture as a special fund. What happened to the last 500 million? There was a 500 million allocation in 2021, and then there was an additional 100 million or 200 million in 2022 for agriculture. Nothing has been said about that. When you look at his projection on oil and gas, and I would agree with Mr. Lal Singh here, the specific is missing, but more so, he spoke specifically about Manatee and that Manatee gas coming into the system around 2028, 2029. But the real question is, have Shell signed off on that arrangement? You talk about Ugandan gas having potential to come in as well. So there is a lot of things that he has not said. It's a lot of speculation. And I'm very disappointed. I speak to my farmers, I speak to my constituents every day. And to me, outside of some, the speaker before me spoke about perhaps election gimmicks. It seems like, the fact that they've lost the Tobago election last year and there was some sort of backward movement to them here in Trinidad for the local elections. It seems important to them that they give some goodies to try and smoothen off their relationship with the public going forward. Okay, but I don't think the budget had anything that made sense to me.
MP Parry, if I may ask, one of the things out of this budget is that of the property tax. And you are the member of parliament for Mayaro. There's a level of insularity historically and a fair amount of wealth coming from that geographic space. What's your view when you hear of the property tax in a community like yours? And the question is there ever going to be property tax in Tobago with the THA where they get a special dispensation because arguing of being economically deprived or isolated? So from your perspective, how does that fit into the development of a constituency like Mayaro where all the wealth is coming from, or part of the wealth?
So first of all, the fact that it's only residential taxes that will be put into the Mayaro-Rio Claro Regional Corporation, the bulk of the commercial and industrial, where we do have that industrial complex in Galeota, we will see no revenue coming into the regional corporation for that. Now, when you look at a constituency like Mayaro, where it's about 65% rural communities, I suspect the per household tax is going to be the $540 per home. Now, I did some calculation during the last debate in terms of the revenue that we may receive from residential taxes. And I can tell you, there is no way that even if 100% of the house owners, the homeowners, paid that tax, which I'm sure they won't, that we would not even receive half of the developmental budget that we get normally through the consolidated fund. So clearly the minister is saying that, by collecting this revenue, we're going to have more revenue to fix roads and fix drains and to do a lot of things. That is not going to materialize. And to top that off, Derek, they are asking to bring in $10, $15, $20 million in a best case scenario in terms of property taxes into the regional corporation. We have heard nothing about the HR requirement that this corporation needs to lift their capacity, their human resource capacity in terms of accounting, in terms of management of financial reporting, even from the position of doing some of the work. Are we upgrading the regional corporation with engineers, planners, industrial engineers? Nothing like that has happened in the local government reform. So it's really hearsay pie in the sky, and we can only look forward to see how it unfolds during this fiscal year coming.
Dr. Gokul Boslan, I would like to come to you now in regards to the property tax. It's on the books. It's due to be fully implemented in 2024. Collection begins then. But the Minister of Finance has stressed a lot on the annual rental value as being the method, the most precise method for the collection of property taxes. Is such method probably the most efficient in terms of local government institutions and bodies receiving the most income from such?
Sure. So I'm going to follow off on what Mr. Parry has started. In terms of determining the best methodology, we need to look at whether or not these regional corporations have the capacity to determine what are those rental prices. Now, albeit, and it is important for us to be fair in our deliberations of any economic matter. The situation in Trinidad and Tobago is such that there is a need for us to determine where non-energy government revenues are coming from. The property tax, of course, is one possible means by which non-energy revenues can be generated. What we need to determine is whether or not the method of execution, the method of application is the most efficient given the resources that we have, given the institutional structures. And from what I have seen and from the conversations that have been raised at the various regional corporations and echoed by Mr. Parry a few minutes ago, the capacity to administrate that methodology is not necessarily as well developed as it should be.
Ryan, I know that you've expressed your concerns in regard to the methodology. If you'd like to elaborate on such concerns now for the public to have a better understanding.
Sure. So the annual rental value, I'm not sure if it's the best basis, right? We are determining an annual rental value. Firstly, we don't have a properly regulated rental market. So we can't assess proper rental values for buildings. And we have persons who we might have trained in the public service to do so, but we're not sure if it's an accurate measure. Let me give you two quick examples. If I pay a premium to live in a gated community, let's just say I pay $3 million for a house, and my annual rental value is assessed at, let's say, $7,000 annually. That same building could be built right outside of the gated community and sold for about $2 million, right? And my annual rental value may even be lower because of the fact that I'm not living in a gated community. It could come down to about $4,000 or $5,000. I've just paid a $1 million premium to live in a gated community, and I'm paying tax based on what exactly? I'm not getting any additional services because there are developers who build in gated communities and outside of them. And within the gated communities, they don't benefit from a lot of the public services that people outside of those communities benefit from. So that's one thing where I think the annual rental value, there are questions about it. And another thing is, if I recall correctly, they said that every single property can be, assessed for an annual rental value. We have many dilapidated buildings all over Trinidad, which on a conceptual level, if the public health inspectorate will not approve those buildings for people to live in, how could it be rented? So how do you really...
So Ryan, is there anywhere there's a methodology that could perhaps bring a sense of equality or equity, or do we need another method to apply if we're going to put anything like a property tax?
My proposal should be like a fixed rate per square foot of land, and then an additional rate if there's building on it. So you might have a residential piece of land, it's approved for residential, but you don't have a building yet on it. So it could be a very small rate. It doesn't have to be an elaborate, exorbitant rate. We know that under land and building taxes regime in the past, we know we can't go back to those nominal rates because it makes no sense. It will not add much to the coffers. So we just need to find a middle ground. I think what can be done is an assessment of, we already have those valuation forms in and it's already in the authority. So they can look at it, assess what the annual rental values are, and they could see disparities. And they will see these problems I just raised here. They will see those disparities. And perhaps a fixed rate per square foot of land and an additional rate per square foot of building space. So that can be implemented.
In the United Kingdom, when Margaret Thatcher tried to bring in what was called the poll tax, it was based on the ability to pay and the number of persons who were living in a particular location and whether they were working or retired or students. So it's a much more complicated system with many variables. You must have some formula along the way. First of all, would people want to pay? And if they want to pay, the sense of it being fair, how do we assert what is fair and to whom?
As I said, we need to have a basis, but I can tell you there will be issues with that annual rental value. A lot of people have not read up on it, they have not calculated it, and they have not spoken among themselves and with others to understand what's at stake in terms of what you'll have to pay. But no basis will be, it would not be equal for everyone, but we just have to come to something that's a more common ground. And I think a fixed rate per square foot, and of course, depending on different variables like agricultural, residential, commercial, industrial, etc. Right? We could use those things. I like what you just suggested, but look at the resources and look at the length of time we've taken to get to the point where those valuation forms had to go in several years now. A very complex system like what you're suggesting, that might take us even longer.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your opening commentary. There's been quite a bit of focus, of course, on property tax. But when we return and we welcome more guests to the program, we will be speaking about growth as well in the economy. The Minister of Finance stating that the economy grew by 2.7%. When we get back to the program, we will expand a bit more on that side of the conversation. We'll return after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us now in studio, we welcome to the program the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, as well as the Honourable Minister of Health, Terence Dialson. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll start with you, Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning. It's an economy in distress, arguably an economy in distress. The government has not stated specifics in terms of managing such stress. How do we get out of this stress?
Yes, well, I think the Minister of Finance went to great lengths today to give some of the policies that we're going to use to really stimulate our economy, create jobs, and to really give everyone a fighting chance in what is a challenging economy. But also remember that Trinidad and Tobago, when you say challenging, it's relative. Trinidad and Tobago is the only country in CARICOM that is still investment grade. We're the only country in the region that is also not in the hands of the IMF right now. And that is because of the prudent policies issued by this government and the Minister of Finance. We've increased the minimum wage. We have to be very careful with that because an increase in minimum wage, a dramatic increase anyway, can sometimes produce hyperinflation and unemployment. So we have to strongly consider exactly what level of increase in the minimum wage we're going to offer so that, you know, some of the more vulnerable persons within our economy have a fighting chance in you know, what has proven to be a challenging time. Also, there's stimulation for SMEs. We have a new facility where some of the small and medium enterprises can access foreign exchange to conduct their business. And we believe that along with some of the other major investments that we're making in infrastructure and so on, will lend itself to decreasing unemployment and really stimulating our economy for growth.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the actual pricing of which the minister has based his budget, going back to what you said of US $85 per barrel and
yes.
US $5 per MMBTU.
Yes.
Is this fair, given that if we look at previous budgets of what the minister has based it off of, the price always seems to be much lower to what he has based his budget off?
Yeah, so right now, as he said today, 85 and 5. Right now, and the oil price is in the 90s, and it has been holding firm. If you remember, we are not just pulling these numbers out of a hat. We source these numbers from international agencies, many of them independent, so that we can come up with a reasonable figure for what we project the oil and gas prices are going to be moving forward. So we expect that we will be on target or close to target. Right now, oil prices are above that. Gas prices are a bit below what we have anticipated, but we believe that we are going to see significant growth from many of the policies that we've implemented in this budget.
Minister of Health, thank you very much for joining us. Well, you would be a bit happy given that you've been given a bit more this year as compared to last year.
Yes, so first of all, I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance. And before I get to health, just to piggyback on Minister Manning's answer to your question, we must take our economy and where we are in the context of where we have come from over the past 8 years. The Minister of Finance was at pains to point out that when we came into office, the price of oil collapsed by 75%. You may recall at one time the price of oil also went into negative territory. That means if I wanted to sell oil to Mr. Manning, he is not paying me. I had to pay him to take the oil. It went down to minus $1 a barrel. When we started to come out in 2019, what were we then hit with? COVID-19. We started to come out of COVID-19, Russia-Ukraine war. And I don't think we in Trinidad and Tobago give ourselves, as a country, enough credit for how well we have managed this economy. To not be in an IMF program, as compared to some neighbors that the opposition always say, why can't we be like them? We have not devalued the currency like other countries. We have not lost that. And whilst, as the Minister of Finance said, the outlook is uncertain, we are doing so much better than many other countries regionally and internationally.
The outlook may be uncertain.
Hold on. 2021, we contracted by 1%. 2022, we expanded by 1.5%. And the first quarter for the central bank bulletin, 3%. And we anticipate for the rest of 2023, 2.7%. I don't think these numbers can be disputed. And I will go back to my original statement. We in Trinidad and Tobago, as a collective, commentators, academics, everyone, we don't give ourselves, in my view, enough credit for how well we have done over the past 8 years.
The challenge, first of all, welcome both ministers. If I may, could I start first with the last comment made by Minister Dialsing. No one is taking away the fact that the country has done reasonably well, considering the post-COVID economy and considering the Ukraine and the supply side. However, the effectiveness of the budget to meet the average man, the average home owner, the average farmer, that's where the challenge is. I mean, the statistics are fine, okay? But as you know, with the greatest of respect, people build hospitals and they lose an election. The connectivity does not exist. And I think that's one of the challenges. We've had no shortage of technically very sound budgets, very good language. However, the connectivity is what is missing. So I'm glad we've had 7, 8, 9 hospitals built, but the notion of health and wellness, the wellness element in the health factor needs to be considered. So that's one of the issues. And I've seen times where you try to allude to the fact of lifestyle diseases. So the wellness element is key. And with our Minister Manning here, the Gen Z population and the digitalization of the economy and all the new e-money platforms and all of that, those are important and they're very good aspiring perspectives. But when people cannot afford to put money on their cell phone for data, that's where some of the challenges are. So my perspective is excellent for a start, but show me how you're going to connect it to the average person, like we have the gentleman here from Mayaro, to the average kid who live in Mayaro. And that's my issue. My issue is making your policies live and tangible to the 18-year-olds.
Yes, well, we've done quite a bit in terms of, one, dealing with the most vulnerable, mainly increasing the minimum wage package there. Also, we've added about $1,000 for children.
But $2 is going to make much of a difference for the minimum wage?
It is going to be significant for people in that strata. For instance, we have about, as the minister said, about 190,000 people working for minimum wage in Trinidad and Tobago. You have to understand, as I said earlier, there's a balance. Right? If you increase the minimum wage too far, employers are going to lay off persons. We're also going to see inflation. We're already battling imported inflation due to the Russia-Ukraine war and coming out of the COVID crisis. So we had to be very careful as to how far we decided to go. There's also the $1,000 book grant for young children going back to school. We've also implemented many educational training programs and also assisting SMEs in Trinidad and Tobago. Because we want to create more employers than employees going forward. There's also the huge developmental investment that we've made in highways, roads, and bridges, which will stimulate our economy, pour more cash, create more jobs, more opportunity. There's a lot that's being done.
But if you look at your last 3 or 4 budgets, sorry,
if I may interrupt, I just want to give the others an opportunity to comment as well. So let's speak about that. Going to Dr. Google Bosland, in regards to the inflationary pressures, arguably households, their purchasing power would decrease. That is a given the inflationary pressures. But what has been stated by the Minister of Finance and by the Honourable Ministers in studio today, is enough being done, inclusive of the increase of minimum wage by 17% or $3, to actually allow people to manage or adjust so that they maintain their standard of living?
I would answer that question in a very applied, very real way. So when you have the minimum wage increasing, what you will eventually also have is a continuous tack-on effect in terms of prices transportation. And it is this multiplier tack-on effect that will immediately begin to impact on the pockets of the most vulnerable. Albeit the increase in minimum wage will be useful and will be appreciated, as Minister Manning said, to the most vulnerable persons. But really what we want to manage is the extent to which that increase is going to translate into increases in other types of prices. My expectation is that in an environment that is already charged in terms of higher prices, we've been seeing especially when it comes to food prices, an increase, and the highest burden for getting food on the tables of the most vulnerable in society. My expectation is that over the next couple months, we are going to see some higher prices as a result of importation, as a result of the host of environmental factors that are resulting in the curtailment of food. But I do not see a significant ease for those persons that are most vulnerable as a result of the changes in wages.
May I just briefly come in here, because the language we are using here, and when you spoke about inflationary pressure, the central bank put out a bulletin, and may I quote, "Headline inflation in many countries has declined on account of lower food and energy commodity prices. Headline inflation in Trinidad and Tobago actually declined, my friend, from 4.7% to 4.1%. And headline inflation is a consolidated basket of goods and services. Energy, food, beverages, medical, housing. Core inflation, where you take out energy and food, has remained the same." So that's what I go back to my original point. We, commentators, academics, we don't. Have you read?
Yes, I have.
Right? And you saw where headline inflation has been reduced, and core inflation has remained the same. So it is not accurate to phrase the narrative in terms of inflationary pressure. The inflationary pressure has actually been reduced on headline inflation and remained the same on core inflation. And let me get back to the issue of the minimum wage, because that is, you saw the leader of the opposition in the unions wanting $35, man in the street wanting $45. Derek, to come back to your point, link it to the man in the street. This TV station we are in here, WESN, how many employees are here?
We have about 20 employees.
20. If this company had to face a minimum wage of $40 an hour, what do you think the management of this company will do?
They'll have to sell more.
They will have to do what?
Sell more.
Sell?
Sell more. They'll have to sell more. They have to sell the station more. It's a product that we're advertising.
Exactly. And what would companies do? They would lay off people. So the minimum wage argument is a balancing act between giving people some degree of comfort, but making sure that the same inflation continues on a downward trend and that people keep jobs. It is better to keep many more jobs at $20.50 than to raise it to $30 and companies start to fire people.
But Minister, the issue cannot only be where the wage determines the quality of life. I mean, you've got to look at the food import bill. You've got to look at the fuel. I mean, your minister gave a number of subsidies. After a while, I sat down listening, and there was subsidy after subsidy after subsidy. Nothing is wrong with that, but there comes a point in time when the state can no longer afford these subsidies, and we got to wean our population off these subsidies. I know it's politically incorrect, But there comes a point in time that level of dependency has got to be
Not
weaned off.
just politically incorrect,
but we
are also putting the people of this country first. There are a lot of economic policies and theories that we could implement, but they would have disastrous effects on the quality of life. You hear people calling for a devaluation. You hear people calling for a $30 minimum wage. No, you say that, but there are many commentators out there that are saying that we should devalue our currency. Now, what happens when you devalue the currency? That immediately we import so much of what we consume in Trinidad and Tobago, including food, that you're going to see an immediate 30% increase in almost everything across the board,
But is your
including medicine
right,
and food.
Is your incremental approach to wean the society of the level of subsistence or subsidies,
and we are
is
saying
that
we are saying that
enough?
there's a time and a place to do that, and this is an economy that is growing. We've come through a very difficult period, and now is not the time. But we are doing all that we can to alleviate poverty in Trinidad and Tobago and to stimulate this economy at this point in time.
All right, let's go to our guest via the Zoom platform, where we do have a member of parliament, opposition member of parliament from our Russian Parry. I know that Mr. Lal Singh has his hand waving, but we'll get back to you in one moment, Mr. Lal Singh. Mr. Parry, all that has been said thus far, your response to the commentary as we've introduced the honourable ministers to the programme.
Sure, and I mean, I've listened to Minister Manning and Minister Dayal Singh, and I mean, we will always have a opposing view on the way how we see the world. Now, what I can say, I mean, Minister Dayal Singh talked about some facts, and we must put the facts on the ground. From 2015 to 2023, our GDP has shrunk by 17.5%. So whatever incremental pieces of 1% and 0.5% and 3% going forward, if you take a look at the whole picture, our economy has shrunk by 17.5% since 2015. Now, to me, the overlying question that you know, I keep asking after you hear budget after budget, while I am sure and I agree that our future here in Trinidad and Tobago is still hitched on our energy sector, and it's going to be that way for another 15 to 20 years. But we continue being a one-trick pony. Nothing over the last few budgets, and today the minister talked about diversification. Let me ask the question. Identify one new stream of revenue for me. One new stream. I haven't heard one new stream of foreign direct investment.
Let me assist the honourable member.
So let me finish.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, my fault.
Let me finish. No revenue stream in terms outside of $16 billion in energy revenue, 37 in non-energy revenue, some capital taxes. Identify one. And what new foreign direct investment opportunity is facing this country over the next 12 to 24 months that's going to raise the level of jobs, going to raise the level of good paying jobs for the thousands of our children that are coming out of UTT and UE every year. And I mean, Derek Ramson would say, but how all of these things are connected to the man on the ground, to all these students who are living in Mayaro and Rio Claro, who has their resumes on my desk, and I can't get them a job. How do we respond to that? So, I mean, when you take all these little pieces and you put them together, but it is not connecting to the man on the ground. And I think that is what the budget as a policy direction ought to be displaying at the end of the day. And that is not happening. We talk about the minimum wage. There may be other options, because when you look at the fact that what if we sat with the unions and the business and say, look, let's increase the work week to 48 hours rather than 40 at standard, at the standard wage, $17.50 at 48 hours a week for a longer period for standard hours. The employee still earns about $140 more than the $20.50 that they are getting now at 40 hours. But it takes out the capacity of the businesses that when you have to work on weekends, public holidays, and so on, that ramps up their overall cost at the end of the day. So there are a lot of there are options that we can look and we can see that we can explore rather than shooting from the hip at times. So I mean, we will disagree on a number of things, but you know, there are some big ticket issues here. Where is the new stream of revenue coming from? I have not seen it. So I think the minister is going to tell me exactly where that...
Minister, just before you do respond, I believe that Mr. Lalsing has to add to the commentary as well. Just before you respond, Honourable Minister.
Yes, good evening, Honourable Ministers. I haven't had a chance to welcome you to the debate yet. In terms of the minimum wage, the increase was welcome. I think it could have been more. I have a different view on this in that if we were to be really practical, $400 a month extra in salary for the lowest income earners, it should not hit your operating costs that much because it's $250 an hour by 160 hours, right? I think that at that level, it's some relief. It could be, as I said, could be greater. And if we really have to be honest, a lot of the inflationary increases over the last few years have already been borne by businesses, the greater shipping costs and the associated duty and VAT that comes with it, and increase in NIB rates in 2016 and so on. Those greater costs have already been borne. So I can't see a $2.50 increase in minimum wage to be a significant cost to doing business right now. With regard to, I have some questions for the Minister and the Minister of Finance. I was expecting an announcement today about approaches and initiatives and contingencies to deal with the BRICS currency that is due to come on stream. We do a lot of trade with China and all of those BRICS countries. I didn't hear anything of the sort. And I heard about an announcement regarding fintech through the IFC. And we currently have some fintech services being delivered here. I work with a company that delivers financing online. So what sort of services exactly are we talking about? It's a welcome initiative, those fintech services, it's a diversification. What is it exactly was the Minister of Finance hinting at today regarding that?
Honourable Minister.
Sure, let me speak to my parliamentary colleague. First, let me remind you of exactly what was reported in the recent central bank report, and that if you had paid attention to that, you would have seen that the most significant growth that we've seen in this economy would have come from the non-energy sector. Year on year, our non-energy sector has grown by 4.2%, while our energy sector has grown by 0.3%. There has been significant growth in the non-energy sector, and that speaks to diversification, also the improvement in our manufacturing sector, which is employing more people and is becoming more diverse in what it can do. In this budget here, we gave them a tax break to further improve their competitive advantage in the entire region. Now, moving on to the BRICS currency discussion, that is not something that we anticipate is going to affect Trinidad and Tobago or the rest of the world anytime soon. It takes significant work for these major powerhouse countries to come together, develop a unified structure, and then decide that they're going to have a unified currency. That is extremely difficult. The European Union has been trying to do this for a few decades now, and they are still having difficulty with it. It is just not that simple to replace the US dollar as the standard business currency across the world. So it's not something that we anticipate is going to be a problem anytime soon here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I totally agree with my colleague, his last statement, that we don't anticipate that an increase in the increase that we implemented in minimum wage to significantly affect business people in Trinidad and Tobago. What we do think is that it's going to provide a certain level of comfort to persons at that minimum wage level. And that should help them to deal with some of the inflation that we've seen in recent times, much of which has been imported. Much of it is imported inflation because of the supply chain issues and is being dealt with by the United States Fed, other European countries that have been increasing their interest rates to try to combat inflation in those countries. And we have been seeing a gradual reduction in inflation, imported inflation in Trinidad and Tobago.
Honourable Minister of Health.
Yeah. You see, again, I heard Mr. Lalsing talk about, he didn't hear about the BRICS currency. Do you know that India, let me just read here. In July, India's foreign minister said, there is no idea of a BRICS currency. The South Africa, I didn't disturb anybody. South Africa said it is not on the agenda. So why should that be a topic for our national budget? Let me finish. My colleague, Roshan Pari, spoke about the GDP shrinking. Again, the central bank report if people will just read this and inform and educate themselves. And I am quoting, the Trinidad and Tobago economy grew by 3% in the first quarter of this year, fueled by the strong expansion in the non-energy sector. Domestically, data from the CSO indicates that real GDP grew by 3%. So where is the shrinkage? I am not, and these figures go to our international rating agencies. Standard & Poor's, Moody's, CARICRIS, they are not PNM, they are not UNC. These figures are examined, audited, and certified before these agencies give us their ratings. That is one. My colleague said, not one new stream of revenue to create jobs. The Phoenix Park project is on stream, foreign direct investment, 14 mainly foreign companies are there.
Well, I believe the minister said 12 domestic and 2 foreign. With a creation of 4,500 jobs. These are real things, but we need to inform ourselves before just throwing out misinformation and disinformation to an unsuspecting public.
Part of the challenge is this. As the population begin to read a little, they come to big conclusions. And part of the issue, and I agree with what you're saying to a point, but there's such a level of expectation in the population where they take a small, minute piece of information and expect great amount of stuff. So for example, when we talk about new currency and the digital currency, and that whole notion of digital money, that puts in a certain mindset how the whole currency market is going to change or potentially can change. And what we need is perhaps much more clearer definitions so people will understand, look, this is an intention. It is going to take X amount of years to get us to that space. So let's not jump the gun. So part of it is the document, your budget, put forward a number of ideas.
Right.
And a handful of persons who would take one piece of the idea, blow it up, and have a greater level of expectation. So one would expect in the budget debate, there should be greater clarity from the respective ministers as they expand the conversation.
Let me piggyback on what...
the debate hasn't started.
Yeah,
It starts on Friday.
Let me piggyback on what my colleague,
the debate started tonight.
Minister Diasing was saying. With the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate, we expect that one initiative to employ 4,500 people. That's just one. The Minister of Finance announced that we're going to roll out several more industrial parks going forward. Let me read directly from his statement. We plan to replicate the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate at appropriate sites to catalyze investment in central Trinidad, the Southwest Peninsula, and the East-West Corridor. And this is but one initiative that we have implemented for diversification.
But that's good.
He spoke about fintech. He also spoke about the marine facilities in Point Fortin. We have rolled out a host of various diversification projects that we expect to be large generators of finance and also employment.
I once read a document called Vision 2020, as you may recall, and that was a masterpiece in terms of development and development projects. We've had a government in charge for 8 years, and there's been no shortage of good projects in each respective budget. The challenge, Minister, and I understand the COVID situation, is that of delivery, right? Of taking the good ideas, the good intent, but being able to deliver. And that is where the challenge will come in the public space. Yes, excellent documents, but how do we translate that to me? For example, if I were to say to you, with this respect, what's the timeline, what's the delivery?
Yes. Now, many of these projects, they can't just appear out of thin air.
Agreed.
You have to develop the framework and, of course, the environment for them to be developed and to be productive. Many of them we have never done before in Trinidad and Tobago, such as the marina plan for Point Fortin. It takes EMA clearance, and that can take a while. You have the certificate of environmental clearance, all of these things. Plus, we were hamstrung by various shocks that our economy had suffered in the past 10 years.
And do you think our population is patient? Do you think, and that's the challenge, do you think our population is patient?
Let me remind you and the population that Trinidad and Tobago is still the foremost economy in the Caribbean amongst our peers. We are still an investment grade country. We are still attracting foreign direct investment. We are still a country that is not in the clutches of the IMF. Let me remind Trinidad and Tobago what being in an IMF program means. It means an immediate evaluation of our currency, and as they call it, a right sizing of our public service.
Right.
We came through the COVID crisis, not a single public servant was laid off. Everyone was paid on time. Now we are coming out of that, and we are stimulating this economy by creating jobs, getting this economy back on its feet, and getting people back to work in Trinidad and Tobago, while also protecting and defending some of our most vulnerable persons that would have been disproportionately affected during this challenging period. That is what this government is doing. We are growing out of a difficult situation, and we have done, I think, a fantastic job in maintaining and growing this economy. And that is reflected by what we have seen in several reports by major international independent agencies, such as the IMF, World Bank, and all the others.
All right, gentlemen, I would like to give the opportunity to two guests who have to leave shortly. Dr. Gukul Boslan, I want to thank you very much, of course, for joining the conversation and for your contribution this evening. But as we close the conversation, if you'd like to summarize your thoughts of all that has been said thus far.
Sure. Thank you, Keaton, and thank you to the panelists and for giving me the opportunity to just unpack some of the preliminary thoughts. Definitely, I can appreciate the position of the minister, and in the context of what has been said, I do agree that the budget was fair. However, there were a few things I expected to see, and they included a little bit of conversations towards green energy and green hydrogen usage, because that has been one of the conversations we've had on the table. I'm not sure if I missed it, but there is an underutilized resource in our immigrant community that I also expected to see some degree of conversation around. So that being said, I am hoping that in the debate, some of those matters come up, and also that the implementation gap that several of the other panelists have spoken about is not going to be as stark in this coming fiscal year. So thank you and good night.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gukul Boslan. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
And to Opposition Member of Parliament, Russian Parr, I know that you have limited time with us, and again, I'd give you the opportunity to share your closing thoughts with us.
Sure, and I mean, I appreciate the view of Minister Manning and Minister Dial Singh. I mean, they do have to, defend the budget at the end of the day. But our job here in the opposition, on the opposition bench, is not to rubber stamp anything. During the debate, we will go in some details, and we will go through line by line, and we will raise the issues. Are there some good things inside there? I mean, I particularly like the 150% incentive for corporate sponsors to look after schools. When I look at the conditions of some of my schools in the constituency, I mean, I will encourage businesses in the community to really get involved with the schools and get that incentive going, so you can help with the sports field and sports gears and so on for some. So I mean, at the end of the day, a budget is a policy direction for the next fiscal year. There are some things that I said that have been repeated. Some of them, I mean, like digital transformation, some of those issues have been repeated over and over and over. And I mean, up to, last week, I'm still trying to assist someone who has been waiting for 5 months to get an NIB clearance. So there are still some issues in terms of digital transformation that the minister keep bringing up over and over year after year. And, we would really like to fix those things, because it is in the best interest of every citizen that the government of Didi get it right. I mean, I have no joy in coming year after year and identifying things that doesn't work, because we do not benefit as a people, as a nation. So all we can do as an opposition in terms of the parliament is go through the budget, look at the issues that the minister has raised, challenge the minister to look at it at a different way, and hopefully before the budget debate closes, he either sticks to his gun or he changes it as he goes along. But we will continue doing our job. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend a couple of minutes and have some of my views expressed for the evening. So thank you again, Peter.
Thank you very much, MP Parry. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a quick break here on the program as we welcome other guests to the panel. I want to thank the Honourable Ministers for being with us, and when we return, such conversations will continue.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Well, the parliamentary debate is due to start on Friday, but the actual debate regarding the budget began at 5:45 p.m. this evening. And tagging in and out in the most affectionate way, the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, has brought in, I suppose, as he's left us, the Honourable Minister of Trade and Industry, Paula Gopi-Schoon. Hello, Minister. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
It's good to see you once more. And we also have joining us via the Zoom platform We have with us Miguel Vasquez. He's an attorney at law for tax and commercial litigation. We also have Mark Perry. He's the founder of Z Labs as we speak about the digital economy. We have Hayden Arlene, former president of the Shipping Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And finally, we have Mr. Anselm Richards, technical advisor for the THA's division for finance, trade and the economy. Gentlemen, welcome to the program and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well,
thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, welcome to the program. And there has been a lot of focus on SMEs in particular from last year's budget to this year's budget. There's also been a lot of focus in regards to exports. And the Minister of Finance actually indicated that exports for the business levy, gross receipts within the 30% brackets, that it no longer applies. This is a measure, of course, to encourage export here in Trinidad and Tobago. But do we have the capacity to do so?
We absolutely do. And the Minister would have spoke about the fact that the non-energy sector has expanded by 5.8%. And I bring that up to tell you that that is just output. But in terms of our exports, I have actually pulled the figures out. And in non-energy manufacturing, exports have really grown by about 15%. And when I speak in the budget, I'm going to actually pull it out by categories: food and beverage, printing and packaging, chemicals, etc. And I've gone as far as looking at non-energy, as I said, manufacturing, particularly taking out removing the petrochemical sector, which is usually influenced. So if petrochemical prices are low as they are now, it will show a negative, it will show a decline. And so I've moved that, and I'm telling you that it's looking very healthy. Is the capacity there? Certainly. I've pulled the numbers again. In terms of reinvestments into the manufacturing sector by our current manufacturers, the figure is somewhere in the region of 1.4 billion in machinery and equipment. So it's substantial, and they are preparing for expansion. And further than that, you've seen the increased number of businesses actually going on trade missions. I just congratulated the TTMA for their largest mission thus far. Since I'm in office, having something like 38 businesses. I think one more came on in the end, 39 businesses and about 46 persons off to Guyana, and a third mission to Guyana. So they have been working hard at it, and the evidence in terms of capacity, I bring you back to the fact that they have spent money on reinvestments, and $1.4 billion on machinery and equipment and so on is a good indicator. And when one looks at the larger businesses, and within that 1.4 billion, you have people like Carib coming on with a new line. They have spent $200 million in infrastructure and machinery and equipment. I had the pleasure of seeing it recently. And that gives you the idea of the kind of capacity that they are building for the exports of these alcoholic beverages, beers and shandies and so on. And then when one looks at another large company, ABIL, they've just spent, I can't remember the exact figure, but an entirely new chocolate factory, very modern equipment. I just went to see John Dickinson, who was diversified into yogurt. I think you all will remember Guiltless Yogurt. And they now have an ice cream line called Sunshine, or Sundays. And so they've spent $30 million on that. So it's not just reinvestment, but I'm seeing new products as well. And I'm happy about that. And it's not just the larger ones. The investment is at the medium-sized businesses, at the level of the medium-sized businesses and the small businesses as well. I have seen, for instance, and if I'm allowed to say so, there is one particular manufacturer who I've known him for 30 years before I got into politics. And he was in every hardware in Trinidad. His next generation came on. And he's now, within 18 months, exporting to 8 countries within the region. So the growth is there.
Sorry to interrupt. One of the greatest challenges, however, is that of being able to access US dollars. Because a lot of the manufacturing sector need the US dollars to buy the inputs required to produce their final product for the export market. One of the things we would have expected, maybe in the budget debate, how do you address the lack of the capacity to access US dollars for the manufacturing that is needed for the export?
But thank you for that question, because, I mean, you would know that there's an existing line in Exim Bank for raw material inputs into.
But when those institutions don't function as effective or efficient, because that's some of the challenges. I hear what you say.
The efficiency is there and the willingness, because the Minister of Finance has substantially increased the foreign exchange that is available. And he gave a commitment as well to doing that, and also introducing 2 new forex lines.
Right.
And one of which I am certain, because Exim Bank has started doing it, which is for the purchase of machinery and equipment. So largely they're dependent on equipment coming in externally.
If I just may interject, there's a point that is to be made by Mr. Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez, you're with us via the Zoom platform. Good evening, welcome to the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. The difficulty we have is, or I have, is that I came to the discussion a bit in the middle. So I'd just like to start off saying that I think for the most part the budget was evenly balanced. Certainly there are some good things, and certainly there are some things that we can, of course, ask for more, or more so try and see how best we can take advantage of that. So if we can, skip ahead at the good, which, we recognize that the government has really done, especially in the past few years, particularly in terms of the economic recovery, and just go to what was discussed in this particular budget, especially as it relates to the manufacturing industry. I think one of the concerns I had was, on the one hand, you have an increase in the minimum wage, a $3 increase. If you look at it on an individual level, of course, it doesn't seem significant. But when you're looking at large manufacturing companies with a large workforce, that certainly adds up. I fully recognize that the government, in this instance, may have included the exemption from the business levy for manufacturing companies that actually do export. But to what extent would this business levy really be useful in the grand scheme of things, having regard to how the business levy tax is structured to begin with? As you all may know, the business levy is a tax that is levied at 0.6% on the gross sales and receipts of a company. But also part of the legislative regime is that business levy is used as a credit in calculating your corporation tax. So in many instances, the net effective business levy is 0. So if you remove that if you apply exemption now, is there really a change between what the position was before and what it is now?
But I would say that definitely is, because if you were paying 0.6% on revenue, and you no longer have to pay that based only on your export sales. It applies to export sales. I'm not seeing your rationale at all. I mean, you're saying it's a credit. However you take it, it's a responsibility, and that is no longer going to be there. So I see it anyhow as you take it as an incentive, and for any exporter, whether small, medium, or large.
I think when we get down to the actual facts and figures, we may see a different result, but I guess it would really be factored on the particular manufacturing company or the company that is seeking to benefit from it.
Well, let's welcome Mr. Hayden and Aline also to the program. Mr. Aline, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
From where I sit, I mean, I can't say if it's a balanced budget or anything. We'll wait for the debate, because a lot of the things you get as lengthy as it is, sometimes you feel like it's just a song. You get a song by just a little tease. But if I'm to speak of certain areas, particularly manufacturing, because that's what I'm here to speak, manufacturing, logistics, and so on, I would say there was definitely some priority given to manufacturing and trade in 2023, and it is evidenced by the numbers. Manufacturing now represents a greater percentage of the GDP, up I think by 3% from 14. It's now 17% of the GDP, which is a sign, which is heading in the direction of diversification, if you're using that as an indicator. mind you, and I saw a previous speaker speak about, over this from 2017 to now, where there was contraction. There was a huge shock in between in the mix there with COVID and so on. So yes, we were taken back, and now we're going forward, and we looking forward. So with respect to trade, I see some positives taking place. There is the business levy. I'll still like to look at the numbers, maybe to determine the actual benefit of that. Access to foreign markets. I know a lot of good work is taking place through the Ministry of Trade and TTCSI, for example, exposing people to the uniqueness of other markets and preparing them to enter those markets. There was an export booster that was mentioned. So all of these things, they are quite positive for trade. I would hope in the debate we'll get some more meat on that. But with respect to there are some other big ticket items that's taken place within the maritime and trade sector that I would hope it wasn't mentioned in the budget. I hope when the ministers take stage at the debate, we'll be able to get some more detail on that. And some of those big items will be an expansion of the discussion on the TTRA. There was quick mention in there, but customs fall under that umbrella, and that is a major concern for us in the industry. We also have the restructuring of the Port of Spain, which is a national asset that has been in flux with restructuring and changing the way they are doing things for a long time. And it would be nice to get some sort of priority in that area. We also know of Carry Dock. What is the situation there? That could be a significant foreign exchange earner if we are able to get this thing operating in a manner that can fill a service that is much needed in the industry right now. The issue of ship repairs and shipbuilding and servicing of vessels and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Ali, so, let's just pause there for a quick moment. Let's take a very quick break here on the program. When we return, we'll continue this conversation, because you're right, there were a lot of positives in regards to manufacturing. There was also spoken about $90 million for scanners at the port, as well as a bunkering hub in Point Lisas, even for the fueling of vessels. So when we get back, we can expand on all of that. We'll be right back after this.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this is screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. So a lot to actually get through, analyze and digest, as where we left off in regards to the bunkering hub for ships, as well as the fueling hub in Point Leases, as mentioned by the Minister of Finance earlier. Mr. Allen, you're still with us via Zoom. Your thoughts in regards to what the Minister stated? There seems to be a greater penetration within the maritime industry.
Oh yeah, definitely. The bunkering hub he's speaking of, if I recall, is Proman and Methanex. So they're looking at options for clean energy. So it's bunkering for methanol. And conceptually, it's a great, wonderful idea. The how is always of concern because bunkering requires, very specific facilities and so on. But I think it's heading in the right direction. It's moving in towards a green economy, which is critical. Right now in shipping, we are looking at reduced numbers of vessels coming through the Panama Canal because of drought conditions. It used to be 36 vessels a day. Less than a year ago, it's now down to 31. So we are looking at that, and these things are causing bottlenecks and could have a upward pressure on the price of freight and so on. So the bunkering of it conceptually is a good idea. Of course, the how, that remains to be seen, and we hope they will address that further in the debate come Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. May I just come
Of course,
here?
yes, Minister.
Very briefly. One of the points that Derek made about Exim Bank and the access to U.S. currency, especially for manufacturers, the non-energy exports, and Minister Gopi is going to bear me out here, in 2021 it was 2.1 billion. It actually grew in 2022 to 2.4 billion. So that shows that the way we manage Forex for productive purposes is in fact working. That's one. Two, Mr. Allen is quite right about speaking about bunkering and when it's going to begin. May I put on the table that some months ago, Proman actually brought to the outside the Hyatt, the first vessel to be filled with low carbon methanol. So that was the sort of genesis of the project. And I fully agree with Mr. Allen. We need to build on that and get that going. That is part of the diversification strategy, and that was with Proman.
Part of the challenge, ministers, is that Trinidad and Tobago is pioneers when it comes to the oil and gas industry, like we had this morning. And what they need now in this country is that pioneering spirit, the spirit plus indigenous capital to push this green economy, to push the hydrogen. And I think that's where, as we go towards e-currency, that is where we need to take a lead. And we expect the government of this country, regardless of who is in charge, to begin to put that on the agenda to transform the society and the region.
Speaking about transformation, shifting the conversation, because like I said, there's a lot to get through, and a lot was mentioned about a different economic pathway in regards to digital economy. The Minister of Finance mentioned e-money issuers from Central Bank 3. There are roughly 40 applicants to be reviewed. And this is where I'd like to bring in now Mr. Mark Pereira. He is the founder of Z Labs, and he's focused a lot on cryptocurrency mining, as well as cryptocurrency trading and the digital economy. Mr. Pereira, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening and thanks for having me. I actually think it's a great bridge from what Derek was saying in terms of pioneering in new industries, especially as we talk about the digital economy, because the digital economy really is a facilitator for empowering MSMEs, empowering diversification, efficiency in business, transparency in transactions, efficiency in delivery of money. We talk about, raising the minimum wage, but 88% of our small businesses and our individuals don't have bank accounts. So I think what I would have liked to see is more of an incentive for digital businesses, so software development companies, as we've seen in Trinidad, that there's a major lack, and we're falling behind in terms of the talent that we do have with software developers, because there's a major lack of incentive for the software industry locally. And I'm talking about this from the perspective of an individual who's come from these foreign markets, everywhere from Europe and Australia and America, that coming back to Trinidad, there's no major infrastructure in place to incentivize technologists or the digital economy to really thrive. And that is something that we really hoped in Trinidad and Tobago, is to see some financial incentives, because the software developers are here and they want to do things like meet the problem of that number we saw from the TTIFC's financial inclusion survey, where 88% of businesses don't have bank accounts. And if we want MSMEs to grow, then what are we doing to incentivize the EMIs who are coming to actually solve those problems of the lack of bank accounts for the MSMEs? And then we saw, a rise in the budget allocation towards the creative industry. But these same creatives can't get bank accounts in the local banks. So I think there's some major problems still needed to be solved when focusing on this budget. I do like the direction in which it's going, because there's the infrastructure there with TTIFC and One FinTech Avenue. FinTech is definitely the tech, a part of the technology that needs to be bolstered and focused in, because it's kind of the silver bullet that will allow our economy to thrive. We've seen FinTech grow GDPs by 4%. For us, that's about $1 billion US. And that enables a lot of economies. So you're seeing Food Drop enabling a lot of small food businesses. You're seeing, TTRS and Food Drop working together and bringing the gig economy to Trinidad and Tobago. So the gig economy empowers more individuals to get jobs and increases jobs. But they also help in terms of distribution of products locally in Trinidad. They help the MSMEs who want to get their products maybe not exported outwards initially, because you need to take baby steps, but export them, prove a market locally, and then start to export and export them throughout the Caribbean and then throughout America, to start to bring in that foreign exchange. So you can see with the digital economy, focusing in on it can start to touch major areas of our economy. But I think there needs to be more of a budget allocation in terms of grants and funding towards the digital economy.
Mm-hmm. Honourable Minister, if you would care to respond.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for that intervention. And I think it's fair to say, because digital transformation is really one of the latest areas for development in Trinidad and Tobago, that you would find that the focus, and you will agree with me, I think you said it, is on the infrastructure. And so we have signed these MOUs with Estonia and with India as well. And the Estonians are, in fact, in Trinidad working with us. And this is not going to happen like Jesus walking on water. It's going to be a lot slower. And you talked about pockets of, you talked about SMEs not having assistance. And I want to still say that in terms of software developers, in terms of grants, there is the availability of grants for research and development. Perhaps we have not zeroed in on it enough, but there is the availability of research and development grants up to $1 million, as I know it, available from ICNTT. And of course, there are other financial incentives for development of your websites through ICNTT. Again, that would be for the smaller manufacturers and so on. We are developing an e-commerce strategy which is related as well, and which would be helpful for SMEs as well, for building upon the ability to do sales via e-commerce. We are developing the infrastructure in terms of ensuring that there's Wi-Fi throughout the country, in buses, in very remote areas, having access centers available in areas where there's not full Wi-Fi available and so on, the distribution of laptops to schools. So that I think infrastructurally it's being done, but as I said, it's such a new area for us. It's not going to happen overnight, but I take the point that you were saying that for a new entrant coming from abroad, you are seeing the gaps, And I think it's good to talk to you to understand where we should go next and that kind of thing. But I'm happy to say that in terms of e-money and so on, I'm seeing some headway there. For instance, in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, on with the expansion of services on the SEW platform, you can now make online payments through all of our services. At all of the 37 services, you can do online payments now. So that there is headway. Not a perfect situation, but I think we are laying the groundwork, and I think we're well placed for the development of this particular sector.
One of the things, Minister, is that yes, we have a lot of technology available, but the challenge is that of the financial institutions, the banks, the cost that they charge the consumers, right? We have a lot of bright people who want to do e-commerce platforms, but our banks at times become hostile to a young entrepreneur, especially if he's going into AI. And I think that's where we need government's assistance to clear the pathway, to help them get access for banking methods. So, because the cost of banking is extremely prohibitive when it comes to e-commerce. And I think, I'm sure our colleague here could jump in, because I've had no shortage of people who want to build a website, want to do e-commerce, but when it comes now to talking to our commercial banks, right, the cost of doing business is extremely prohibitive.
Minister.
Sorry, Minister.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really enjoying the conversation about cryptocurrency and so on, but as a government, we have to be careful to the risks that we expose the country to. Cryptocurrency, as we know, it could have massive gains in short period of times. It is very, very volatile. People have lost millions and millions and tens of millions. However, cryptocurrency is not backed by either the gold standard or any hard currency. Let me finish.
This is not cryptocurrency now. Sure, go ahead.
And also, it has been associated with terrorism financing. Now, we as a country that spend hours in the parliament debating FATCA, coming off a blacklist, a grey list, being blacklisted by the EU, Global Forum, do we really want to jump into this thing head first, or do we need to examine all the parameters so that the population could understand the risk, the systemic risks to the country?
But Minister, with greatest respect, this is not cryptocurrency. These are genuine business people trying to do e-commerce.
No.
Yeah, there are
I'm
two different
talking
things.
to what the gentleman before was speaking about.
The cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Mr.
About the cryptocurrency.
Yes, Mr. Pereira, I see your hand, if you care, yeah?
Yeah, so, Terence, I definitely, Dr. Dialsing, I definitely hear your concern.
Terence is fine.
Right. I definitely hear your concern, and that is the first issuance of cryptocurrency came with Bitcoin, and a lot of focus on Bitcoin and its volatility and what it's been able to facilitate, like, the money laundering, the terrorist financing, something that our banks and cash also facilitate, right? But let's not focus on that. There is innovations that have come with cryptocurrency that are now being adopted by countries, cities who want to innovate. So the Bitcoin just tends to be this real distraction, because there is a lot of fear around, okay, well, how do we treat this thing? And I think an intimate understanding of the technology and what it allows, it's actually just very innovative technology packaged and really orchestrated very well to bring about a beautiful financial instrument. And now you're finding that they're using the cryptocurrency technologies to have US-backed currencies that are backed one-to-one with US in terms of collateral. So I think what I would challenge the government to do is start to look beneath Bitcoin, look at the technology and how it can enable things like not having to rely too much on a corresponding bank to send a foreign currency outside of the country, because now when you're moving to a blockchain, let's focus on the blockchain aspect of cryptocurrency, because I think that's where the true innovation is, and that's where the true benefit is for our country, is that we have this global financial platform that we can start to, if we really move into a digital society, we can start to take some of our digital assets, some of our stocks, we can loosen up the stock exchange market, invite more Forex to come in. We can start to put carbon credits on there. That's something we're working on with UNICEF. We can start to look at the digital assets that we do have and move it onto an innovative financial platform. And then in doing so and understanding the technology of blockchain, we can also start to educate our citizens on, hey, maybe not focus too much on the Bitcoin aspect because it is very volatile, understand the risks, and if they do want to invest in Bitcoin, we bring an ETF to them in our local stock exchange market where there are the regulations that can protect citizens, So there's more conversations, I think, that need to be had around Bitcoin. And to Paula's point as well, she said to reach out to the local technologists. I think that's a great strategy. It's XATF, a lot of these governing bodies say to do these public-private partnerships because technology can be intimidating. It can be a lot of new words and jargon that's thrown out here and there, but that's what we're here in the industry to do, and in the technology industry is really to just start to have those conversations, unpack everything so we could understand how we can propel our nation forward rather than see technology as this thing that we're not really getting a grasp on or conquering at the moment.
All right,
because we have the talent. So let's drive it forward.
Well, that is precisely where we bring back in two young individuals. Mr. Ryan Lalsing is still with us, as well as Mr. Miguel Vasquez. Both have points to be made. Mr. Lalsing, if you would like to contribute.
Sure. Good evening. Well, to the Minister Gopi Spoon, regarding that business levy, I just got some info on it. It was a 20 million expected loss based on the nuclear finance, which works out about 3.3 billion in revenues. But coming back to intangible assets, right? Because we're talking about digitization and so on. But for over 15 years, accounting and tax practitioners have been clamoring for capital allowances for intangible assets. We are now fully into the digital age, and our tax legislation has not kept up with it. So regarding what Mark was speaking about, it is a barrier to entry because you would not want to put that significant amount of cost out there, which you'll have to take up as an entire cost in 1 year. Not in 1 year. So you'll have to write it off, amortize it, but you will not be able to claim back those expenses as allowable expenses. Has intangible assets been on the cards for capital allowance purposes? And can we expect to see that in the future, now that we're fully into the digital era and digitization products and services?
Mm-hmm. All right, so
let me just say that we're fully in terms of developing the infrastructure and in terms of getting the technology in at various levels. I don't think that we're fully in enough to say that you can expect the government to provide incentives across the board just yet. I think we're going to be in a better place in 1 year's time to have a better understanding of where we are, where the consumer fits in, where you fit in, where the business person fits in as well, and we are going to be able to build all those incentives, I think, as we move along.
I just want to come to Mr. Vasquez now. Mr. Vasquez, yes, you had a point to be made.
Hi, yes, just 2 points. The first point, I do recall when the Honorable Minister would have mentioned that he anticipates a 20 million loss from the business levy exemption. But it still remains to be seen what the actual figures for companies would be having regard to the practical reality of each credit. But my hand was really raised in relation to some points raised by my co-panelists. Mr. Ferreira. Well, first off, the government has issued or introduced a few incentives over the past few years as it relates to digital economy. Two in particular, it relates to tech startups, new tech businesses and existing tech businesses who they are entitled to a super allowance of 150%, up to a maximum of 3 million. All right. Another incentive that was introduced would be for the first year of income, subject to half of the corporation tax rate for the first 100,000 chargeable income, and the first 200,000 chargeable income for the subsequent year. The issue with these incentives are they both expire or end at the end of 2023. What I didn't see from the ministers whether they intend to extend that period or not. But, there are certainly good incentives that were introduced in the past.
Minister, if you'd like to respond to that, the intent with regards to the, as he mentioned, activities related to software programs that are coming to an end at the end of 2023.
But certainly there's a media review, and I don't know if it's at that time. And not only that, the Minister of Finance introduces at any time the extension. He's going to build out the act to introduce several of these incentives which were introduced, and I have no doubt that this perhaps could be extended at that time. You can't say everything in a budget, but certainly you've brought it up, and I'm going to bring it to his attention. But without a doubt, I would think that those would be two of the incentives that would be extended.
Just a touch, I think Mr. Allen was making the point about how we account for intangible assets. I know it has been considered under the new IFRS rules. Mr. Allen, have you had a discussion with ICAT on this issue?
I think it's Ryan you're talking about.
Ryan.
Intangible assets.
Yes. Have you had a conversation with ICAT on the issue of intangibles?
No, we've been up to date with the standards and so on. It's not so much the accounting standards. Remember, sometimes the accounting treatment is guided by or trumped by the tax treatment for something.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So in a case like this, you remember, for example, telecom companies, they invest heavily into fiber optic capacity. And when you look at those arrangements, it's basically a ray of light that they pay for. So,
a photon.
So, and how do you now justify putting $5 million on the books and writing off over a period of time without claiming it back? And that is a capital mistake.
Yeah. Well, I really don't have an answer for you on that one. I'll leave that to the experts.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we of course have other contributors to the program. So I want to say to Mr. Mark Pereira, thank you very much, sir. I give you the opportunity as a young entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago focusing on the digital economy. If you'd like to share with us your closing remarks.
I definitely appreciate you giving me time on the platform. I definitely as well heard the remarks from the honorable ministers, and it's a great sign that we are taking the next steps towards enabling the digital economy. And I do understand that Miguel has said that there were incentives. From my experience, there just needs to be a little more, and sometimes financial incentives, so the grants and that even with the Export TT grant, I can say that if we were a very established digital economy, then digital economy or anything digital transformation really wouldn't need to make it into the budget, because it would just be a part of the fabric of all of our industries. But particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, I think it needs to be a line item to be focused on in terms of incentives, so that we can start to build up our digital workforce, and then it'll just start to become behind the scenes again, and we'll just become a more innovative society. So that's my last remarks, but I am definitely coming back home liking the direction it's taking, but I guess us young entrepreneurs like to see things move a lot quicker. But of course, I definitely I'm appreciative of this time. So thank you all, and have a great night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, a lot more to get into. When we return, we will focus on healthcare. The Minister of Finance said good healthcare is equal to productivity. There has been an increase in the minimum wage by 17% or $3. There have been arguments that if we are looking at an increase in minimum wage, you also have to look at increasing productivity. So when we get back, we'll welcome more guests to the program, and the Minister of Health could speak on good healthcare. We'll be right back after this. What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation,
I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
My name is Carl Media, and the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Ryan Lalsing, Chartered Accountant, who is with us via Zoom, Mr. Miguel Vasquez, tax and commercial litigation lawyer. We're also joined by Hayden Allen. He's the former president of the Shipping Association of Trinidad, and of course we have joining us in studio Derek Ramsmooge, the Honourable Ministers, Terence Yalsing, Minister of Health, and the Minister of Trade and Industry, Paula Gopi-Skoon. We are now joined by the Honourable Dr. Lakram Bodo. He's the Opposition Member of Parliament for Pfizer-Baden, and bringing him into the conversation because, as I mentioned before going to the last break, the Minister of Health focused a lot, he spoke a lot about health. He spoke of our ageing population as well, but good health is equal to productivity. Dr. Bodo, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Bodo, good health equaling to productivity, that goes in line also with the minimum wage. As mentioned, there have been arguments that if you are increasing the minimum wage, you also have to increase productivity. Good evening, sir, and your thoughts on the budget presented by the Minister of Finance.
Yeah, again, thank you, and hello to my colleagues on the panel, my colleagues in the Parliament, and to Derek Ramsmooge. Essentially, I can comment from 2 points of view. One, as you know, as a member of Parliament and what it will bring to my constituents, and of course as a shadow in the opposition for health. I'm always happy for an allocation, an increased allocation for health. So I see the 7.4 billion allocation. But you did mention increase in productivity. And, you know, in the health sector, we the point where we have, I'm sure the minister will agree, where we have, the capacity, we have the plant, we have the institutions with the hospitals and so on. But our challenge remains staffing, and I think our challenge remains the efficient, or the more efficient use, should I say, of resources to accomplish what we have to accomplish. We have to look, our big challenge really remains a chronic non-communicable disease problem, and as noted in the Simanga report, which came out of the COVID-19 pandemic examination, we have what's called the NCD, that which I see the minister is trying to address certain measures, but I still think we have a way to go. I know all that needs to be said on the health sector could not be said, of course, by the Minister of Finance. And, I look forward to the Minister of Health's presentation in terms of outlining exactly what measures he intends to take to address this ongoing problem. He does have a challenge in the sense that, we have to treat with the acute problems while we deal with the measures to prevent, which is where the chronic disease comes in. But overall, I'm looking for the measures that will be outlined that will address the problems of staffing. It's a big issue. In fact, nothing was mentioned about addressing the shortages, particularly of nursing. We do have a shortage by statistics presented in the Auditor General's report, and by my own questions in the Parliament responded to by the Honourable Minister, where we do have a shortage of nurses, especially at our new hospitals in Point Fortin and Arima. And of course, we do have a shortage of doctors as well. We have a lot of unemployed doctors in the country. And, I'm looking forward to the Minister's measures and initiatives in terms of transforming that. And just to tie back into the wage issue, of course, there is the issue again, of how we will measure, of measurables and so on. And maybe the time has come for us to look differently at how we look at, results and value for money in the health sector. So I will pause at this. Perhaps the Minister may want to come in at this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. And if I may just add 2 points to that. One, you've had a fair amount of experience dealing with a crisis, a national crisis. And we've seen the Minister of Finance basically putting forward new hospitals. We have a human resource challenge. We have an attitudinal and a behavioral challenge in our society. And maybe it's a humble suggestion, we need to look at wellness and health, because they sort of go together now, because one is more preventative and one is at a very early age. You look at the levels of stress in our society, and you look at all the other social challenges. So in the coming months and years, for us to use our hospitals and our human capacity more effectively, how would you go about transforming our health culture in this country? Because that's your challenge.
Okay. So between yourself, Derek, and Lakram, you all are asking me to tell you everything I'm going to say in my budget debate. Lakram, so no problem.
I told you the debate started.
The debate starts now.
And the reason why I say that is I have stents in my heart, I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, everything. So it's in my interest to figure out.
You're the walking wounded.
Yes, how you're going to help me live.
No problem. I will give you a preview of what I'm going to say in the budget debate, Lakram and Derek. Okay, first of all, let's take loss of productivity on NCDs. The IDB conducted a study in 2015. They estimate at that time it was costing this country, now listen to my words carefully because the opposition always misinterprets this. It cost this country $6 to $8 billion TT dollars a year in treating with NCDs, which is diabetes, hypertension, cancers, in both direct costs, indirect costs in both the public and private sector, and loss of productivity. So if you have all this thing, your children have to leave work or give up work to see about you, that is loss of productivity. The opposition always say, well, the health budget is 6 billion, how could it be this? Right, that's one. Two, I just want to respond to some specific questions before I tell you what we are doing. You are talking about use of hospitals. I am transforming this and moving away from treating people in hospitals to primary health care, which is the preventive side of it, versus the treatment side of it, which is in a hospital bed. So what are we doing? We launched something called the HEARTS program, which is to manage hypertension. For the first time in this country, I have data now that says we have 21,000 persons enrolled in the HEARTS program, and 37% of them have controlled blood pressure. We never had that data before. This is fresh, new data that now, subsequent years, we could gauge on how we are doing. With diabetes, we have launched a series of specialist diabetes wellness centers. Wellness centers. And Lakram will know what I'm talking about. If you're a diabetic, are you one?
Yes.
You know what HbA1c is?
I hear of it.
Right.
But I will know
It's a-
Trinidadian who won't measure
HbA1c is a measure of your glycemic control
index.
over a 3-month period.
Eating sweet potato and curry.
Right. We have a cutoff of 8. Anything above 8, we shift you into these wellness centers. And if you get 2 consecutive readings over a 6-month period of less than 8, we discharge you back into primary health care. Coming out of that, we hope to decrease the amputation rates by 20% in 2 to 3 years. Currently, we amputate 1,700 either toes or limbs per year. Wow. And 30% of our beds in hospitals is taken up with people with diabetes. That's why I'm switching, and have been doing that, to the health center model, primary health care. So we are ramping up our primary health care, and that is starting to pay some serious dividends. And that is where the wellness comes in. What is wellness, Derek? What is your concept of wellness?
To be able
And
to...
I'll be asking Paula too, and Lakram. So Lakram, you will tell me what you think wellness is.
To be able to manage mentally stress levels.
No.
That, to me.
To you.
To me.
Lakram.
That's my wellness.
What is your concept of wellness?
Well, I mean, the official definition, of course, is the absence of disease. But I think Terence, you will well recognize is not only the absence of disease, but
No. That is the definition of health. What is your definition of wellness?
Well, good mental and physical well-being, essentially.
Right. So wellness is the development of habits that lead to spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental well-being. It is not the absence of disease, that is health. Wellness is developing habits. So not necessarily praying, but being spiritual. You want to go to church? Fine. Mosque, mandir. Get that emotional, spiritual side down pat. Let me finish. But also, you would have seen me in The Guardian this morning, leading an exercise group in the Savannah on Saturday, getting people moving under the TT Moves thing. Because you cannot separate mental well-being from physical well-being. And that is what we are doing, ingraining habits into people that lead them to a place of social, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being.
It's about balance.
It's about balance.
I'd like to just ask, Honourable Minister, do you see it necessary, or is there perhaps an opportunity to incentivize programs that will encourage people to perhaps exercise more? Because you mentioned the spiritual aspect, but the physical aspect as well, get people moving, as you said. That in turn would reduce the bills on the healthcare system, such as CNAP.
So we have placed exercise equipment under the IDB loan we took in all schools, in community centers, to get people moving. We have done that, right? We have launched the TT pedometer app, which you can download from the Google Play Store, put it onto your phone, and we ask people, set your target at 4,000 steps a day and try to walk 4,000 steps a day. Not necessarily lift weights, but just get into the habit of moving.
But could we integrate what you wish to do in other communities, in other ministries, via other ministries?
Yes, and that
as
is
well?
what we are starting to do, yes.
Yes, Dr. Bodo.
No, Shaz Khan here.
Sorry, yes, Mr. Khan.
Okay, pleasant good night to all, good evening,
Good
sorry, to
afternoon,
all
Mr.
the
Khan.
panelists. Okay, I have a very, I mean, I'm here you're talking health, right? I am on agriculture, but I have a very layman sort of a example of what is good health. I'm a farmer. I am contesting why it is that we can't be eating healthy in this country, right? Most of us know that we are what we eat. So you could talk wellness, physical, mental, spiritual. If you do not make the proper food available to the children, starting from children coming right up to adults, you're going to have a negative effect on your health, right? Our health bill is almost 6 billion, while the agriculture sector gets 1.1 billion, right? That is what is happening to us in this country for a number of years. Every year you get 6 and 5 and 6 and 5 and 7 billion for health and everything else. But the problem you're having is that we have a lot of contaminated food coming into this country, right? And we are not producing enough healthy food into the country. We have a lot of contaminated chemicals coming into the country, fertilizers and necessary pharmaceuticals coming in to even feed our animals, our chickens. If we don't continue trying to fix that, then you'll continue continuously deal with a high food bill. Imagine in our schools, in school feeding program, we are using an imported chicken, and the former Minister of Agriculture, this is not what I'm saying, former Minister of Agriculture is saying that, I know some of them will be upset about what I'm saying, but it's the reality. We are using chicken to feed children in school that is beyond the 120 days.
I would dispute that strongly, Shiraz, because if I can call you Shiraz. I would dispute that because I know that the chickens which are used in the school feeding program would be from our local producers. We are self-sufficient in poultry, in table eggs and so on, and I know for a fact that we are using our local produce.
So how come the imported chicken, how come so much imported chicken is coming into the country when we have so much of problems within the local production?
No, sure.
We have a local production.
No. You made the claim that we are using imported chicken in school feeding program. You are conflating two separate issues. What we are saying is that in the school feeding program,
Minister,
for our children, we use locally produced
Hold on, Mr. Khan.
Producers?
Hold on, Mr. Khan. Let's give the ministers the opportunity to respond. We'll let you ask your question, but just if you'd like to respond, and then Mr. Khan, you can ask your question.
Yeah, so I was just making a point emphatically that we are not using foreign chicken and in the school feeding program. We are using only locally produced chickens.
Mr. Khan, just hold on 1 second. You'll get your opportunity. Everybody will get the opportunity.
And as far as possible, local fruits and vegetables are also included in that diet which is fed to our children. A lot of what you're talking about is choice, and I couldn't agree with you more about reducing the food import bill. And collectively, as CARICOM, we are intent on reducing that food import bill, as we've said, by 25% by the year 2025. A lot of what you are talking about, and there are a myriad of incentives that are out there for persons to get involved in farming and agriculture at every level. There are seedlings programs and so on, so that even if you are not a farmer, you can produce food at your home. And I'm still thinking that the population is not totally into it. And this is why they are purchasing the foreign products. I'm saying that you will still have the need to purchase some foreign items, but I'm still saying there are too many choices where people are putting in their shopping carts foreign goods when they can in fact do the provision, our local fish, our local flour, our local chickens. there's a lot that you can do. You can consume an entire pallet, let me finish, an entire pallet of only local foods. You get up in the morning and you can make some sada roti with some pumpkin and some bhaji, etc., or some karaili, all local. And if you go to our farmers markets, these are available to you at a very low cost, and there are more and more farmers markets across the country. And the Minister of Finance has today put in that extension of green markets
into the vegetable boxes.
All right, let's give Mr. Khan the opportunity to ask this question.
Because what happened is that I am seeing on all the supermarkets we are selling imported meat for $20 a pound.
Well, that's a matter of personal choice.
That's a matter of choice, and we are not so self-sufficient in beef, etc.
I agree with you. It's a matter of choice and a matter of a scales of economy. But what I'm saying is that if you give the local farmers the necessary tools, because almost every interview on WSN and all the other networks, people are talking about the price of food. How do you're not giving me as a farmer to produce. I know you are saying there's incentive. I cannot access your incentive because I do not have land tenure, which is 90% of the farmers in this country. And it wasn't addressed in today's budget, right? I am saying there's certain things that need to be done to increase our production. And we need some protectionism from the importation. Because when I met with you, that was my major meeting with you about dealing with the importation of rejected meat, and the Minister of Agriculture, former Minister of Agriculture, make it clear on television and all over, do not buy the foreign meat. We had a situation for the Christmas gone year where it was only flooded with foreign meat. It cost me $25 a pound to produce a pound of meat live weight, and which is work out to be 50 pounds. But yet you have people selling imported meat, rejected meats for £5 for $100. $19.99 a pound. How do we compete with that, Minister?
But you can't compete because we are not producing the volumes to be able to compete. You are saying that you are producing, but largely you are not producing enough to satisfy the country. Hence the reason why we are still dependent on the imports. And the focus has to be
If we face a 30-year problem of development, of lack of development in agriculture, we can't get a producer satisfied. We can't do that now.
Let me interject.
And we are.
Let me interject and just ask.
And I want to say make one point here. We have a problem in terms of aging farmers and so on. And this government has a great focus on youth in agriculture. And we've introduced several programs, including the homestead programs, which gives them not only the academic learning, but all about agriculture and farming, etc., but also actually gives them the plots of land, the homesteads, 2 acres. It gives them as well the stipends, and of course the access to all of the myriad of incentives. But in addition to that, the Youth Agriculture Shade House Project, which we are doing with the assistance of Guyana, the Youth Aquaculture Project, and we are finding that the youth are interested. These programs are oversubscribed. So we are going from the bottom up, recognizing that there is a gap in the interested parties in farming. And I think we're doing very well with the introduction of these programs. And as Minister said in the budget today, we are still going to continue to build on incentives, build on the current incentives of the $400 million that he has allocated to agriculture in the development program. I think it is. He said $250 million will go into further incentives. And
Madam Minister,
allow me just to finish.
I agree.
One moment, Mr.
Let me make
Khan,
another point. Let me make one more point. And I'm giving you a live example again. For instance, we have gone into rice production on a larger scale, in that we've adopted this program where we're going to plant 50 acres of rice, where NFM will do the milling process, and so that by 2025, we will, in fact 2024, we will be producing white rice and brown rice, not only for consumption, but for export. But you know what the problem is right there? 75% of the preference is for parboiled rice, whereas in Jamaica, 70% is for white rice. But so it's a decision to make. But the point is, this is another program, another successful story, and you will begin to see the results in 2024, 2025, when we have the yields coming forward.
Mr. Khan?
Okay, hear me out. at one point in time, just 3 years ago, right, we still produce rice in this country. We're down from 5% to like no percent now, because what happened is that all our local production of rice is being used in NFM for making us pet food.
Yes.
Right? That is a reality. Good quality rice are being used to make pet food. So we don't have access to even the byproducts of the rice for our livestock feed, which we used to be doing a lot, getting a lot from when Caroni Limited was operating on rice, or all the rice farmers are operational. Right?
But let me stick up in here as you're talking about the rice industry and the fact that what NFM is producing is really for the pet food industry. I want to tell you that there is an investment being made by NFM now for $13 million to improve the Carlson feed plant and to be ready for the processing of the rice. We're going to have to put the first yield into storage, and that we will be, when that comes on stream in April next year, we'll be able to refine and polish and produce white rice, so that will be on the market beginning by mid-year 2024. So we're moving away. Yes, we're moving away from the pet rice. We may still be able to do some of that, but the focus is on the white rice in the first instance, and in the medium term to move into parboiled rice, which I said for local consumption and for also exports.
I love Mr. Khan's passion, and I'm sure he's well aware on the rice issue. We have formed serious linkages with Guyana.
Yes.
To bring in rice seedlings into this country. Right? That's a tangible result of the Prime Minister going to Guyana and forming those linkages across there. And I'm sure Mr. Khan is aware of it. He may have forgotten it.
But I want to add, right now, in this country, we have foreign companies, so to speak, bringing in animal feed, creating animal feed, creating rice, creating eggs, creating chickens. So we have a fair amount of producers, maybe 4 or 5, but big producers, right? We have a fair amount of persons actually looking to set up more mills, dealing with rice, dealing with flour, right? Yeah, that's right? So it's not that there does not exist the technology. The problem is the local farmers need to be more productive, need to produce the economies of scale, because they're not producing 100 pounds or 200 pounds, right? They're in a volume and a commercial business.
All right, let's ask Mr. Khan his thoughts on that.
Doc.
Yes, sir. How are you?
Doc, I agree with you. There are big people coming to invest into agriculture. No problem with that. But you have those big people who are coming with their investment, while we, the farmers, are still here waiting for our land tenure to go to the bank and to get our finances and so on, to do our own project. We have been waiting for 30 years, 25, 30 years. Some people are waiting for their land tenure. So they will condemn us, and they will condemn us. They will condemn us for not looking to upgrade. But how could you upgrade without finances? And then what happening is that because you are not registered, you cannot seek the necessary incentives that the Ministry of Agriculture is, getting involved in. Now, let me give you a little example of why it is that we suffer. About 2 years ago, during the pandemic, the Minister of Finance sent out a thing to the banks that those people who are not registered cannot have MasterCard and create a business account. We cannot register our farms because we don't have land tenure. And we are suffering from all of those little things that has us under pressure in production. It's not that I want to create an argument and condemn everything that people are saying, but the reality is that farmers cannot increase their production or look for incentives or finances or work with somebody to get something done, or group out, because we don't have land tenure. Dr. Ramsam, would you know how long we have this issue as our years?
Okay.
You know, and if it is that you're not going to register the farmers, and every year in the budget a new process to going to register the farmers, and they keep repeating it, then we are back to stage one 30 years ago.
Shiraz, there are so many farmers that are registered in this country. I don't know, you seem to think that there are great obstacles to registering as a farmer. I am not aware, maybe there are particular circumstances why particular persons cannot register, but there are by and large across the country many people with farmers' badges, even within our, within our parliament, you know that.
So Minister Clarence Rambert, when he said 80% of the farmers are not registered, all the farmers in Wallerfield, Esmeralda, Toure, Carsonfield, around West, those farmers, one or two in between may have a lease who know somebody, but majority of us cannot get our leases and cannot get the lease that expired 20 years
Mr.
ago.
Khan, let me interject you. Mr. Khan,
and that is a reality because the former Minister of Agriculture was saying 80% of the producers are,
I understand. We appreciate your passion. You're making some very good points. I just want to give the ministers the opportunity because they unfortunately, they have to conclude.
So I could tell you, and Minister Gopi could tell you, in this cabinet over the past 8 years, the amount of notes that have come from agriculture to grant land tenure to farmers is unbelievable. Sometimes it's 10 a week. And this is going on for 8 years.
Hundreds.
On the issue of financing and incentives, farming and agriculture in Trinidad is probably the only totally tax-free, incentivized industry via the Agricultural Development Bank, from vehicles to inputs.
It's all over the world tax-free.
Hold on, Mr. Khan.
Nobody interrupted you, sir. And it is so easy. I know people who register as farmers and they have no obstacles. They get the financing and they are producing. Maybe Mr. Khan may have a particular issue, but I don't think that is representative of the normal state of affairs as far as agriculture is concerned. And lastly, every year we have this narrative that only 2 million or 3 million is given to agriculture, so we can't produce food. The Ministry of Agriculture does not produce food. The Ministry of Agriculture is a facilitating agency to help people produce the food by giving them all these tax-free incentives. So
I agree with you, but facilitate.
So to raise the issue that Ministry of Agriculture only gets so-and-so and how we expect the country to produce food. The Ministry of Agriculture is a facilitatory agency to enable people to produce rice, chicken, whatever, right? The Ministry of Agriculture does not grow the food.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have other people in the Zoom chat room. At this point in time, I'm going to take a break. I want to thank the Honorable Minister of Health, Terence Yal Singh, for joining us, as well as the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry, Paula Gopi-Skoon, for also joining us for their time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break here. When we return, we're going to speak about Tobago in particular. We're going to continue on agriculture because the Minister of Finance said Tobago has an important role to play in terms of agriculture. We'll be right back.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen
screen,
Because it's silent.
it's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up, Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
My name is Carl Media. I am the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us tonight. Stimulating conversations, and we thank the ministers who made the time to join us. Now, the wonderful part about this program is that we have so many voices with so many contributions to be made. And the wonderful part about WESN is that the hardworking staff have said, you know what, we have to give everybody an opportunity. We're going beyond the 9 o'clock mark tonight. So I'd like to acknowledge once more the guests who have been with us from earlier on, Mr. Ryan Lal Singh, chartered certified accountant, made a very good point earlier in regards to the NIBF, which we will get into later on. We also have Mr. Miguel Vasquez. He's an attorney at law, specializing in tax and commercial litigation. Hayden Alim, the former president of the Shipping Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Shiraz Khan, very passionate in his conversations earlier with the honorable ministers as we spoke about food security and production. And now we have joining us as we direct the conversation to Tobago, opportunities in Tobago, Mr. Anselm Richards, technical advisor to the TH's Division for Finance, Trade and the Economy. As we speak about opportunities as well, I'd like to welcome Ms. Kadeen Barrow. She's a managing director of Magnolia Finance, and she's an advisor to SMEs. Ladies and gentlemen, wow, what a wonderful lineup. I may say intellects who are all part of the national conversation. And we start this part of the program with focusing on Tobago. And this is where I go to Mr. Anselm Richards. Sir, Tobago is allocated $2.85 billion, $2.29 billion in recurrent expenditure, $260 million for the development fund, $18 million for URP, and $9 million for CPEP. The Minister of Finance says for the most part he agrees with the policies as stated in the budget presented in June by the Chief Secretary earlier this year. But he also said he wishes you guys well. Mr. Richards, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me, and let me say good night to the other panelists that we have here tonight. Well, probably you understand why the Minister said he wished us well. Because when you look at our budget submission in June of this year, you recognize that we were asking for 6.9% of the national budget to fund our proposed work program for fiscal 2024. The Minister continues, and the central government continues to give Tobago funding at just around 4.3% of the budget, which is just satisfying the lower end of the DRC range of 4.03 to 6.9. We think that Tobago deserves a fairer treatment than that in the budget process. We were prepared to work with about 5.5%, which works out to be the mean of the DRC recommendation, which is a fair option until we achieve complete the autonomy project, when that will be resolved. We cannot have a democratic arrangement where Tobago's development is predicated against the milk of human kindness of the central government. That is not a fair option. If you look at what happened, $260 million for development program out of a budget for the capital investment program for the country of $6.2 billion is really placing a knee at the neck of Tobago's development agenda for fiscal 2024. There's very little we can do with that. That represents a 35% cut in the allocation when compared to last year, the $400 million that we received last year. Definitely that is an unfair situation. It appears to be a weaponization of the budget process against the Tobago House Assembly and the people of Tobago. We cannot accept that, and we are going to speak out about this in the coming days. This is totally unacceptable for the people of Tobago. We have outstanding liabilities that we inherited, and we have been having this conversation with the Ministry of Finance for the last 18-20 months, and we have kept patchy responses from the Ministry of Finance. We have outstanding infrastructure work that was damaged last year at the end of 2022 with the increase in rainfalls across the island. All our road infrastructure, our retaining wall system were down. We received no support from the central government to have those things restored and upgraded. So we are in a very bad place. We are now struggling out of the COVID impact on the tourism sector. The economy was open for international travel very late, because we were probably around the last set of countries in the Western Hemisphere to open up for international travel. So we have some basic structural issues. I think Trinidad and Tobago are at the point where we have to probably initiate a new project where we call building a new nation. I think the center of this country, which is the constitutional arrangement, is not holding this country together. And probably some of the problems we are facing as a nation has to do with how this country started, with this colonial constitutional arrangement that is still struggling and stifling the growth of this country. And all that we are talking, I heard the issue about agriculture, and there is no argument on that. The minister said today agriculture is contributing less than 2% of GDP. There is significant problem in the agricultural sector. I don't see how the ministers are trying to defend that. The data speaks for itself.
Okay, so if I may ask, we recognize that there is a financial challenge because not enough revenue has been coming your way. And you said you're going to raise that in your public discussion. But what are your options in terms of operating Tobago's economy with that budget? What are the options available to you?
Well, there's really no option. And the problem we have as a government, an island government, is that we don't have the luxury for off-budget financing. The minister mentioned that he will borrow over $600 million for a housing program for the Ministry of Housing. We don't have that luxury. If we go to borrow off budget, we have to get approval from the Ministry of Finance. So the fact of the matter is that the Minister of Finance runs the Tobago economy.
So
he determines what we can do and what we cannot do.
So when you talk about having more autonomy for Tobago, where does it start? Because a lot of people basically perceive that as being political economy, but you have a budgetary issue. So it's basically that of the economy. What are the frameworks you're looking more space to run your country, to run Tobago? Remember, Tobago is part of Trinidad and Tobago. And yes, we've heard all the conversations historically of the challenges. But my other question would be, how much money does Tobago actually earn in terms of part of the revenue for Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, that's a very interesting question. If for the life of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago have not been provided with the resources to do the kind of development to create the economic opportunity for growth of the economic base, then you come and ask me how much money Tobago contribute to the national. Let me finish because that's an issue. That's an issue that people tend to default to when this issue of the revenue allocation to Tobago comes up.
Yes.
Just imagine in 2024 allocation, we are given $260 million to treat it all our development agenda. How are we going to create new pathways for the expansion of the economy if we cannot do the infrastructural work to open up new sectors and new growth poles and so forth on the island? So therefore, if the central government is strangling the growth of the Tobago economy, then it is disingenuous to come and ask Tobago how much money you are contributing to the national purse. But Tobago is contributing and has been contributing significant sum. The Minister of Finance mentioned the Calypso field that is going to be activated in time to come with Northwoods. I can't remember the oil company that owns that field, but that field is in Tobago's water.
It's in the waters of Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago is not a sovereign state yet.
Well, probably we have to get to that because we are not getting the kind of benefit that we are entitled to from this arrangement. Because I am very frank about this thing. The arrangement is not working for Tobago and the people of Tobago. And it will be unfair to us to try to accept this reality.
Mr.
And that's why I made the point that we need to have a project that speaks to the building of a new nation, that deals with these injustices that is inherent in a constitutional arrangement that has a cabinet that is totally out of control.
Mr. Richards, I want to allow other people to speak, but before we get to the others, let me just ask you, from your, given your experience and your opinion, there will be people who would disagree with the numbers presented by the Minister of Finance, whether it be now or for the last 8 years, or for successive governments in their presentations and what they would have allocated to Tobago. But how is it that Tobago is expecting more money whilst having the minister to actually balance the budget in other areas?
Repeat that for me. How Tobago is expecting?
How is Tobago expecting more money, more of an allocation, whilst also asking the Minister of Finance to balance his budget in other areas that contributes to national development?
Okay, so we have two islands that forms the nation state. And if we use the population distribution among the two islands as a framework for the distribution of the national resources, the population of Tobago is about 5% of the national population. So if you get 5% of the budget on a per capita basis, probably that's a fair starting point. But when you keep feeding the island at 4.3% of the budget, that is placing Tobago at a disadvantage. We are not getting a fair deal in this arrangement, and we need to have a conversation around the issue of autonomy, which will put some kind of constitutional protection in this arrangement that will ensure that Tobago's share of the national resources cannot be changed at the whims and fancy of the Minister of Finance. You know what has happened since 2017? We have not received all our parliamentary allocation by the Parliament. The Minister annually withholds money, and when we wrote him about it, he said he has the authority under the Exchequer Act to do that. We have been 150-something million dollars have been withheld from the Tobago Assembly since between fiscal 2017 and 2022. That is what we have been.
All right. So
that's the reality.
Okay, so broadening the conversation for a moment, Mr. Richards, and we're going to come back specifically to Tobago because there are other areas that the Minister of Finance mentioned as well. But broadening the conversation to a little bit more, to include everyone this evening, you mentioned something about a new national strategy, a new way of thinking, a difference in terms of economic approach, a different pathway. And this is where I bring the others into the conversation. Let me first welcome Ms. Kadeen Barrow. She's the Managing Director of Magnolia Finance and an advisor to SMEs. Ms. Barrow, good evening. And as we are speaking about a new way of thinking, forging a new pathway forward, as an advisor to SMEs, did you see or hear anything as presented by the Minister of Finance that would allow for such?
Hi, good night to everyone on the panel. Unfortunately, I'd have to say no, that I don't believe I or the small and medium enterprise community would have heard anything that would really change the strategic direction of where we're going. I think the challenge for most of the SMEs that I deal with is really the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. And I don't feel like we would have heard that addressed. I think in the minister's speech, he would have alluded to some maybe almost 80% of the small business community that don't even have bank accounts. But we're trying to move into a digital era. We're trying to move into digital payments and currencies, but we don't have a significant proportion of our small enterprises having access to a bank account. There were a lot of incentives and stimulus programs to give funding access. But how accessible are these programs really? I think that SME stimulus program is an excellent initiative. But from a strategic perspective, I have found the qualification criteria to be quite onerous. So you have a stimulus package that has been rolling now for maybe about 2 to 3 years, where most of our GDP is generated from the SME sector. But the minister would have stated maybe about 1,000 of these loans have been granted under tranche 1 and tranche 2 of the program. And to me, that speaks to how accessible are these loans really for SMEs. We were looking for something that would at least reduce the criteria for accessing funding to take some of these businesses into their path, to take them into the direction that Trinidad is trying to go in terms of non-reliance on the oil and gas sector. And I don't think we've seen those things adequately addressed. Some of the tax incentives for sponsorship of schools, all of those things are excellent initiatives, but a lot of our small businesses aren't even at a capacity where they can sponsor a school or sponsor private or public school. They are really trying to get by. They're really trying to pay their workforce and to stay afloat at this point in time. Some of the concessions that we would have seen for implementation of cybersecurity, also excellent. I do think my small and medium-sized business counterparts right now are focused a little bit more on their actual security, given the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, where they've been robbed and they've had to make such heavy investments in CCTV cameras, which I know once you import, you have certain concessions there, but is it adequate? A lot of our businesses have had to hire armed security, higher insurance premiums for cash in transit, these sorts of things. And I think we were hoping to see some concessions or some tax breaks for the SMEs making investment to ensure their safety and stability from a crime perspective as well.
All right, Ms. Barrow, thank you for that. Moving across, Mr. Vasquez has a point to be raised. After Mr. Vasquez, I'm coming to you, Mr. Alain, because we're touching on crime as well now and the ease of doing business. Let's go to Mr. Vasquez first.
Hi, thank you, Ethan. Ms. Barrow would have raised a number of good points, and they're also reflective of what I thought as well as into the budget. The starting point being, the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. The minister would have touched on, briefly touched on some of the work that is being done, which is as a start point, is excellent work trying to incorporate and upgrade the single electronic window and trying to digitalize those processes. However, before we could even get to that stage, some of these simpler processes are in many instances just absolutely broken. For example, the registration of foreign entities only recently the company's registry was able to fully get on board. But then when you get to tax registration, you have another form disconnect. Yes, it's simple for companies that have fully resident directors, but if there's even just one non-resident director in that company, the delay is significant. The extent of documentation required is much more extensive than for fully resident board of directors. And then when you get past that, if the company is to be VAT registered, there's another issue there again. At a certain point, the BR has been asking for companies to prove that the company can exceed the VAT threshold. However, under the legislation, it requires you to show that you are likely to exceed as well as exceed. So there are two limbs for registration. But right now, the BR is only insisting on one limb. And that, that certainly can create a conundrum for many companies because many companies who come into the jurisdiction and they set up these operations, from the get-go, their counterparties would like to reclaim the VAT that they pay on these services, and not being VAT registered yet means they can't reclaim that VAT. So it creates this conundrum where, in order for you to prove that you're VAT registered, you need to have the service or to have the income. But in order for you to get the income, the company wants you to be VAT registered. So we have this circular issue that's continuing to evolve. And even going on to the incentives that Ms. Barry would have recognized that crime is a significant factor that we would have really hoped to see some incentives aim really at encouraging or even facilitating greater exemptions or greater allowances when you approach hiring physical security.
Let's come across to Mr. Hayden Ali now. A lot of the conversation has been focusing on the ease of doing business, and there's been a lot of focus also on crime. I don't know if you might be the happiest out of all that have contributed to the program this evening, given the fact that as part of shipping here, import and export, the Minister of Finance indicated that $90 million has been used or is going to be used to acquire, I'll get it exactly here, $90 million for 4 new scanners, supply, delivery, installation and commissioning of 4 new scanners, and $80 million additional, as well as additional handheld scanners. This all goes into the ease of doing business and delays at the port, which has a trickle-down effect, of course, on all here in Trinidad and Tobago. It also affects the amount of taxation that importers would pay as their goods remain on the port, so they pay a tax as well. And then it comes back to security as well. So, Mr. Alain, I don't know if you're satisfied in regards to what the Minister of Finance would have mentioned, at least in regards to national security.
As a layman, I would say I'm not satisfied with respect to what he put forward for solutions for ongoing security issues. However, from sitting in the shipping industry and what goes on at the port, it is encouraging that he did in fact mention that there is this significant amount to acquire for state-of-the-art scanners to be placed at the 2 major general cargo ports. So we would hope that once it's implemented, we will get some level of control with respect to the importation of guns, ammunition, as well as narcotics. So that is encouraging there. But I could mention on the panel before, speaking about connectivity, policies coming forward, but not really connected to what is really taking place. So my colleague with that mentioned, Kerdine, when she spoke about the SMEs not, being more interested in personal security than cyber security, it demonstrates a disconnection between the policies they're proposing and the value they expect from it. So I look at it, it's a good thing, the scanners. There are also a number of things that need to take place in terms of policing and coordination with customs and custom preventative and so on that need to take place. Everything is interconnected, and I get more comfort if I hear more about, yes, you have these policies, but a demonstration of how all of these things are connected, and therefore I'll be more convinced with the value or the output they are hoping to achieve down the road.
Coming across back to Mr. Shiraz Khan, because ladies and gentlemen, a great portion of this conversation thus far is focused on the ease of doing business, of course, and we heard from SMEs, we heard with regards to shipping, we heard even with regards to taxation. Mr. Khan, you were very passionate earlier on, and one thing we didn't get to touch on was parental larceny as part of national security. Now, the Minister did address parental larceny today to saying that there will be increased patrols, increased officers. But of course, that will be affecting farming in TNT and again has a trickle-down effect. Mr. Khan, I think you're muted. I think you're muted, sir. I think your device is muted.
Okay, you hear me now?
We can hear you. Continue with your contribution, please.
Okay, so what happening is that I heard it this year, I heard it in 2022, I heard it in 2021, 2019, I don't want to go all the way down. We keep hearing that, but you know what happened this year? Majority of these officers of the PDL larceny squad left the squad because of the unfair treatment that they were getting from the Ministry of Agriculture. The PDL larceny squad, which is SRP police, they function from the Ministry of Agriculture, not of National Security. So we have that problem where they are not satisfied, they left the job. From 180 officers in 2009, we are down to just 30 officers manning 3 posts in this country. So unless you start to see something happening, imagine that the PDL larceny squad have vehicles operating since 2012. They have not gotten no new equipment since then to now. They have not gotten the resources of uniforms or even necessary PPE for them to operate. PDL larceny remain one of the most critical issues to deal with farmers. I myself in July suffer a theft of 30 of my best sheep and goat and so on, 30 goats and 10 sheep. On one night I had to actually confront the bandits who was trying to steal my cows. So and a number of farmers have lost their lives fighting for their protection. Last year we lost a farmer who got killed in his avocado field in Waller Field, right? So we continue to have this problem, but it has been best word of mouth, lip service, and until we start to see something tangible happening, until we see the necessary, and the same thing I'm saying, right? If the budget is to give you an example of how serious they are in agriculture, yet you have something as important as food in the country, because on television you see people interview, they're calling about crime and food. But yet this year, last year we got the second smallest. This year we got the smallest allocation for agriculture. So if that has to tell me how they think about agriculture, but allocation just tells you all, right? Apart from that, right, we as farmers, we have to face all the high, because we don't produce everything that we eat. So everything from insurance, the prices have gone up, from water problems, from fuel, all of that we face. But yet in our other aspect of our agriculture, especially me who is strictly into livestock and vegetable production, I am facing an increase of price every month, every 2 months, every 3 months, every year. On chemicals, because what happening is that they have a constant problem with foreign exchange, and where yes, they have signs up on their counters that the prices will fluctuate due to the fluctuation of the US dollar. We have problems just like everything else in terms of the chemicals that comes in. The prices go up, or the fertilizer, or the seeds, all of that we are facing. Even the medication to treat the animals in terms of dewormers, antibiotics, vitamins and minerals and all of that, we continue to face those increases. So you are telling me that the prices that was 50% less in 2000 or 2021, you still want to get a bundle of body for $1. You want me to raise my technology of production of matching the international standard, but you're not giving me the tools to do so. Land tenure, respect or increase in allocation. Once I have my land tenure, I always tell most people when I do an interview, and Dr. Ramsamud will bear me out, we don't want no money from the government, you know. Just put the necessary resources for us to get into production.
I want to.
We will do that.
Mr. Khan, just pause for a moment. I actually want to bring Mr. Richards into this conversation, back into the conversation, and we've stared a bit as we've focused on the ease of doing business and security. You've brought up, of course, the issues in regards to farming. Mr. Richards, the Minister of Finance says Tobago has a vital role to play in the recovery of agriculture. He also mentioned culture and other avenues, but he mentioned agriculture as one of the specifics. In that sense, $260 million for development. How does this afford Tobago the opportunity to focus on agriculture as well as playing its role, its capacity in the development of agriculture here in TNT as a nation?
Well, you heard the minister read some excerpt from the THA's budget on agriculture. We have a clear strategy as to how we view agriculture and the importance of agriculture in our overall health passport for the island, because we are promoting food sovereignty, safe food system. We want to eat our food as medicine and not to eat medicine as our food. So we have a clear approach to our agricultural strategy in Tobago. But the problem we face, one, we have a very aging farmers population in Tobago. We are looking at that. We have the issue of the size. Most of the farms in Tobago are homestead, just over 2 acres, around 2 acres. So we have a little challenge with capacity. And that's one of the reasons why we introduced the concept and exploring the option of setting up 2 mega farms. Each will consist over 100 acres. That should give us a good oomph in our agricultural production on the island. So Tobago has a significant role to play. We have, at one time in our history, agriculture was the mainstay of the Tobago economy. I think there's
Trinidad.
There's still significant potential there. We want to explore that, but we need to get the kind of investment through the public investment program for the development of the access road, the infrastructure to aid and grow the agricultural sector. That is not happening in the manner that we want it to happen. I think we come to the place in Tobago where the cottage industry style economics, where they're giving you $200 and $300 million to do development work for an entire island for an entire year, just can't create the kind of momentum that the island needs to, to transform the economy of the island.
But sir, forgive me. Yes, I've heard the discussion about the focus on the quantum of money. But one of the challenges we have in both Trinidad as well as Tobago, the inability for the agriculture sector to basically, I mean, I hear the land tenure, but what do they really believe they need to do, or why don't they have the will to do what is required to develop the agriculture sector? I hear you talking about the state preventing X or Y or not giving the required subsidies. But why is it we can't get private sector or find a way for the farmers to enhance their role in developing the agriculture sector over the last 25, 30 years?
I think what is happening, and if you listen to what the teacher would have presented, we did our research on the agricultural sector, and we think what is missing is that an institutional arrangement that provide the kind of research in science and technology to drive the transformation of the agricultural sector is missing from the national space, or it is not organized in that kind of deliberate way. So if you recall what the minister said about Tobago agricultural sector, is that we have developed an institutional framework for Tobago Agricultural Research Institute called TARI, that is intended to drive the transformation of the agricultural sector, to introduce smart technology into the agricultural sector. I think that is what is missing in the agricultural sector in Trinidad and Tobago.
But forgive me, sir, so all the historical development of the different agriculture institution and the Agriculture Development Bank, for example, or basically that of our fishing policies, you know, what comes over? After 60 years of independence, we operating as though we have not moved agriculture forward in any form or fashion, and we are bluntly looking for one excuse or the other.
No, you see, what is missing from the equation is that sustained injection of science and the research. How do you maintain, let's say, are we doing the research to see what kind of new varieties we need to respond to the climate change? What is driving that kind of research into agriculture? We continue to talk about these things without understanding where the world is going in terms of agricultural transformation. There are all kinds of research taking place. Are we waiting for the other countries in the world to do the research and then we just buy the results? Or are we doing our own unique type of investigation into agricultural development from a scientific standpoint? That is, those institutions that have history, they are not sustaining that kind of effort that is necessary to push the transformation of the sector. So we in Tobago recognize that we have engineered an institution to do exactly that kind of input into the agricultural sector. But I just want to shift gears.
Very quickly, Mr. Richards.
Yeah, just to speak a bit on the issue of crime and security in this country, and the way we have been approaching the issue of crime and security in this country, and think that the solution to this thing is to train 1,000 police officers per year. The problem in this country is that we have a criminal justice crisis in Trinidad and Tobago, which includes problems in the police service, problems in the judiciary, problems in the prison system. And if we don't look at the crime from that perspective of criminal justice system, we are going to continue to one-sidedly or lopsidedly look at this thing from a police perspective, and we'll fail to put the necessary institutional transformation requirement across the criminal justice system to respond to our criminal challenges. Let me say this.
Very quickly, Mr. Richards.
Coming from law enforcement, because I do have law enforcement experience, and I just say that policing alone would not solve this crime problem. We need to even look at the construct of the Ministry of National Security and see if the institutional arrangement that the Ministry of National Security is more than enough to respond to our crime challenge. For me, I think we need to reorganize the Ministry of National Security into 3 critical departments. The Department of Border Security that deals with custom, coast guard, immigration, and all those issues. A Department of Internal Security that deals with police, and we need to bring private sector security service into one grid to deal with that. And then we have a Department of Defense that deals with.
Mr. Richards, I'm gonna have to ask you to pause on that point. I'm apologetic for that. We don't have much time left, and I want to focus on 2 more points before, and my panel has been absolutely fantastic this evening. Thank you guys very much for your patience and your willingness to contribute. I want to focus on 2 more points before we bid farewell, and that is, yes, we focus a lot on our aging population, the NIB and how it's no longer sustainable proposal to increase the pension age from 60 to 65 years. That's one of the things on the book. But before we get into that, the issue of roughly 72% of businesses in Trinidad and Tobago not having business accounts, and what that says about trust towards the financial institutions in Trinidad and Tobago or the financing system in TNT. So I'm going to actually start with Mr. Ryan Larsing, whether or not this is a concern that we all should be worried about in regards to trust at least, or any other areas regarding our financial institutions?
Oh yes, well definitely, because if it is that this money is not in the system, and I'm careful about my comments here, because we're saying that businesses don't have business accounts, but we have laws against commingling, and it could very well be that many people operate their businesses and pass money through personal accounts or keep cash holdings, right? So I'm not sure that encapsulates what is being proposed. But if it is that, in fact, monies are not going through business accounts, obviously it's not out there, it's not in the system, it can't be tracked, it can't be flagged if it's an irregular transaction. So you look at potential loss of tax revenues, because if it's not being reported. So it is some concern. We need to delve a little bit deeper into not just the fact that there's a percentage figure, 72% of businesses that don't have business accounts. So we need to dig into it a little bit more. But there are all these little things, those factors inside of there, and mainly that money needs to get into the system, and it needs to be tracked.
All right, Ms. Barrow, not much time left, but I'll ask you as an advisor to SMEs, this is also concerning that 70% of businesses do not have business accounts.
Yes, I think it actually is a great concern for a lot of the points that Mr. Lalsing raised from a tax net perspective. And I do think it speaks, you mentioned trust, but I do still think it ties back into the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. It's quite onerous for some businesses to even get to open a business bank account. It's difficult to get an appointment. It's difficult. You come on one occasion, you don't have all the documentation, you're advised. There's a slew of documents required to open a business bank account. And I know we have our FIU regulations, etc., but I think there's some work that can be done there to make that a bit easier. I think it will benefit the Revenue Authority and all other authorities that can use bank accounts as a way of tracking economic performance, etc. And for what it's worth, the small business community wants to be compliant. At least my membership, we want to be compliant. They want to do the right thing. They want to pay the relevant taxes, get the necessary clearances, and have access to opportunities. But the ease of doing so and the information available to make these processes simple and seamless is just not there.
Mr. Vasquez, your thoughts on this as we come towards the end of this evening's program?
I think it's absolutely concerning if 72% of businesses don't have their business account. And I agree with my fellow panelists. You have to look at it from two perspectives. One, from the loss of revenue and the lack of oversight by not having these regulations, but also from the perspective of understanding why these companies or why these businesses don't have a business account. Could it be because of the extent of red tape in order for them to open that account, or what else can be done to assist it? It could very well be that I know from in many instances where, as it relates to multinational companies that trying to operate in Trinidad, if they don't have a BR number, then they can't open a bank account. And many instances in the past where the BR number takes months to get. Some companies just can't open the bank account, and then they're forced to either not operate in Trinidad or forced to look for different avenues. So, there's no one reason, and I think understanding what all the reasons are would lead us to decreasing that number.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we actually conclude this evening's proceedings. Again, it's a lot, as mentioned by the Minister of Finance. He had just about 4 hours, over 4 hours of a presentation to compact that into discussion with everyone. I want to thank all for their contribution this evening. Mr. Ryan Lalsing, thank you very much for your time, sir. Mr. Miguel Vasquez, appreciate your time, sir, and your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Hayden Allen, sir, it's been a pleasure. Thank you once more for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Shiraz Khan, your passions really had a lot in the program this evening. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Anselm Richards, Appreciate your time, sir, and Ms. Kadeen Barrow. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you there will be more opportunity and more time to contribute to conversations on WESN. Derek Ramsamuj, thank you once more for your presence, sir.
My pleasure. I just want to add one point to what they were talking about. We, in all our budget conversations for the last, let us say, 60 years, building an entrepreneur class is a function of moving our society forward. And our last set of speakers alluding to the fact that our banking system hinders the development of an entrepreneur class when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses. At one time, banks were very, very community-oriented. They knew who their customers were. But the KYCs that are know your customer basically impedes the development of proper banking available for small businesses. So the budget has come. We'll have all the analysis later on, but not much has really changed.
Ladies and gentlemen, once more, thank you very much. And like I said, there's opportunity on WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, the debate only just begins. The Minister of Finance has presented his figures. What will the next financial year lead in terms for Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of national development? Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Keaton Shaw, and have a great evening.
WESN.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this: screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you